a little 5-year-old girl tells her mother, "Mother, you need to know God does not exist." The mother is surprised to hear and asks, "Well, why do you think so?" And the girl replies, "Well, if God existed, then God would answer to at least the very important prayers. I prayed so many times for the war to stop. So now it shows that God does not exist and we are all alone." The mother thought hard how to respond and assured the girl, "No matter what, we have each other, so we are not alone." And it is in this spirit that we offer this ISSA Connects for Ukraine event to make sure that every parent, every caregiver can assure their child that they are not alone. And at the same time, as a network, we work very hard to make sure that every parent, every teacher, every practitioner, every organization, and all of us working on behalf of young children feel the same, that we are not alone. And now for going into our 2 sessions today, please share on the screen again so we see our sessions. And I will quickly go through the plans for today. We will spend this first session from 1 to 2:30 Central European Time to look at the support that is needed for children and families who experience the war and for the early childhood professionals in Ukraine and in countries receiving refugees. We will then take a short break of half an hour and we will come back for the second session. Many participants may be able to join just the first or the second, but we will for sure share the recording so you won't miss if you cannot attend. The second session will look at local, responsive, and agile solutions to meet the needs of children and their families in Ukraine and in the countries receiving refugees. I mentioned earlier that we invited speakers from different countries affected by this, and also those working very hard on the ground. This is also hopefully only the first of many such ISSA Connects for Ukraine events where we bring together colleagues from the ground to share their insights and experiences. And for today's events, our moderator is Mihaela Ionescu, ISSA's program director. And now I will pass the floor, the screen to her to go a bit deeper into our 2 topics today and also to introduce the speakers of the first panel. Mihaela, over to you.
Thank you, Liana. And thank you for this warm and emotional introduction. And I'm pretty sure that the following 1 hour and a half and also the second sessions will be in the same spirit that you have already preempted our discussions. A warm welcome from my end to all those who decided to join us today. And the first topic of the session will be about children, families, and professionals, and those that are doing their best to meet the needs in the conditions that they have, sometimes very dire conditions in Ukraine, but also in the countries that have welcomed them. We will focus primarily on Romania, one of the countries with the second highest number of refugees. And for this first session, I'm going to have in the discussion warmly inviting our panelists. First one will be Solomia Bojkovic, an expert at the Reform Support Team at the Ministry of Education and Science in Ukraine and co-founder of the network of kindergartens called Birdie Children's Place in Ukraine. Ina Korbenko, welcome, psychologist and co-founder of the kindergarten Happy Kids and a step-by-step trainer in Ukraine. Didi Ananda Devapria, director of Amurtel in Romania, and Carmen Lica, director of the Step-by-Step Center for Education and Professional Development in Romania. As I said, we will start by learning first about the needs of young children and their parents and the ways of addressing them. You can move to the next slide, Eva. And we will discuss first about those needs and ways of addressing them, in Ukraine, and then we will move to Romania. Solomia is the first panelist that I will invite to share her thoughts, experiences, and also ways of addressing the needs of children and then of parents or caregivers. We learned from them. Before introducing you, Solomia, I just wanted to mention what we have learned through our colleagues from Ukraine, from the Ministry of Education in Ukraine, that as of April, and I'm quite certain that the situation might change quite fast, as of April 2nd, several preschools have been destroyed. Close to 300 are damaged, close to 1,500 are providing education services remotely, with close to 400 welcoming children in their buildings, and very few provided blended learning for young children. We also learned that in several municipalities, the preschools and schools are used as shelters for the internally displaced persons. The situation differs across the country, but the hardship weighs equally in all places, as anxiety, insecurity, emotional and physical exhaustion are constant feelings among children and also adults that are around them. You, Solomia, represent a network of kindergartens, and it would be very helpful for our audience to hear at first hand what you can share from your work with children and parents in this past almost 2 months since the war started. So it would be your floor now just to share what were your experiences and what you have done and you have learned in these weeks as you were providing services for children and parents. Solomia, floor to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very thankful for such a great opportunity to share my experience of this more than a month of war in the context of education. Please, next slide. Thank you. We had a pause during the month. Our kindergartens were closed and we didn't know what to do, as we didn't know what to expect in the nearby future. I mean, few days, 3 days. We all understand now what kind of events we all were going through and still are going through. But after the month of being closed, we decided to reopen as we are situated in Lviv, which is more or less safe. And we decided to reopen as we have a few clients, like 25% of clients here in Lviv, and we have new parents, new kids who have come, I mean, from the different cities which are not safe right now. And we really have the demand from the parents to reopen and to provide some preschool education for the kids who are at home now. And we decided to reopen. So in a few of our locations, we created a shelter. And the first picture you may see, this is the shelter in one of our kindergartens where we organized some food, some water, some toy corner, different activities. And actually it looks really cozy and comfortable for kids. Next slide, please. And this picture from the kindergarten, which has opened on Monday, because we restarted our kindergartens network one by one, not all of them at the same time. So this one reopened on Monday, and yesterday we had the first air raid alarm for this week. I'm in Lviv, and while kids were putting on their coats and going down to the shelter, the air raid alarm stopped. It was really short, and you know, kids were really upset that they cannot play there in the shelter with other kids, because we decided to go outside for a walk as the air raid alarm stopped. And to tell you the truth, Even in this situation, even in these events, kids really want to play with their peers, to have some fun, and even during these moments of air raid alarm, they sometimes understand it like a kind of a game. Please, next slide. And here are a few photos of the other kindergarten. Fortunately, we have in one of them a really big basement with heating, with a WC kitchen, and all the facilities kids need to be provided. So their kids even sleep sometimes during during the day. I mean, the smallest kids of our kindergarten, so we do not wake them up if the air raid alarm is during their dream. Please, next slide. There are our nap cots, some food, some water. We have sleeping bags. Actually, all of that we have provided before the war started. We were getting prepared to all the events which might happen, and our kids know how to what to do during the air raid alarm, where to go, what rules to follow, because we had a few trainings before the war started, and now during these events, kids know what to do very naturally without any negative emotions, anxiety, and so on. Next slide, please. If talking about what we shall do and what we shall do not when kids come to the kindergartens or to the daycares who had some experience during the war, and actually all the kids in Ukraine had some experience of the war, even that kids who are in more safe places, in more safe towns in Ukraine. But still, we all are going through the war. So the main demand for all of us, and I mean kindergartens in Ukraine and kindergartens abroad, is to show kids that they are in the safe place. So the space must be safe as physically as emotionally. Kids must have really lots of time and space to play, and they need freely chosen game, and they must have enough time for play. If talking about interaction with adults, there must be minimal intervention and guidance from the adults. Of course, kids need to have opportunities to create on that way they really want to create. Doesn't matter what, doesn't matter what kind of result they may give, they have to play on their own time and on their own game, whatever. Also, if talking about interaction with other children, which is really necessary for every child, there must be some support of a facilitator in case of some negative situations between kids. Also, kids must have opportunities to experience, interact, and play in natural environment and with the animal world. And I mean, this is really great if kids have opportunities to walk outside and to observe nature. This actually kind of a healing for kids in the crisis. Next slide, please. Also, I want to focus on the free play, as the free play is really important for all the children, and of course, this is the most important for the children who have gone through the crisis. So first of all, the play must be freely chosen. It must be personally directed, intrinsically motivated, without no result to be provided for adults or for other peers. And of course, it must be in a secure context, as physically as emotionally, as I said. For us to understand free play for a kid is, it's a sense of normality. It's a way to regain control over their lives and to feel a sense of personal value and self-worth. This is very important for kids to have a free play in the environment with the other children, with different materials, toys, and so on. Please, next slide. Also, I would like to talk about a few activities. The first are the physical activities, which are very important for kids to feel their bodies. And, this is kind of taken back to the place before the war, when kids may move, may feel their bodies when they're going through some dance activities. They really feel much more safe. It's like going back to the normal life, and that's why we need to provide lots of physical activities for the kids. This may be movement activities, breathing exercises, dance activities, different imagination games which are combined with physical activity. I mean, to tell to the kids, imagine you are a tree. How do you grow? Where are your branches? Imagine how the apples are growing up on the branches of your tree. And when kids are moving during the story, they really going somewhere, different places from the events which they have gone through before. Also, talking about art, this is really important. I mean, kids need to express their emotions, which they cannot sometimes express with the words, or to the adults, they may express them during the artworks. So this is important to provide kids open-ended materials. They need to make individualized artworks. Creating some 3D constructions with Play-Doh or something like that. Kids laboratory, something to create something new where kid may gain the result at the moment. So we do not have to wait for the results lots of time. For example, making some crafts with kids, which are really easy to make. This really helps kids to heal. Okay, next slide, please. And a few words about topics which are better to avoid. First of all, we do not have to talk about home and family. And I mean, not talking about some stories, not reading books, not asking about a family, about favorite toy at home, something like that. These topics may really trigger kids. And we cannot even imagine how some topics might trigger kids. Also, we do not have to ask about events to avoid topics of sadness and anxiety. Do not provide books of inappropriate topics. I mean, some fairy tales which may end with a fight when someone kills somebody. You know, lots of fairy tales have these topics. Also, it's very important to avoid toys with loud sounds that may scare kids who have gone through the war. I mean, even musical cars with sirens, crying dolls, balloons. So this is it about the toys. Next slide, please. Also, a few words about how to support parents. Now parents are coming to our kindergartens, and new parents, I mean, and they went through the different and horrible events in their lives with the kids. And this is very important for us as the teachers to be patient and to stay calm. Patiently answer many questions that parents may ask. Also show in every cases that our place is safe, to show that here kid will be safe as physically as emotionally. Also, it is very important to maintain the confidentiality of parents or caregivers if it is needed. Also, not to make assumptions about what family might have experienced. And my last advice is carefully communicate and carefully contact with the parents, not to with the confidence and on that view that here as kids, as parents will be safe, and we'll do our best for them to feel happy and calm here in our place. This is it from me.
Thank you, Solomia. And well, besides commending you, for all the work that you and your colleagues are doing amidst the war, I believe that the main messages that we can draw from your intervention is that despite the very difficult conditions, creating a safe space, physically and emotionally, and engaging children in free play, in physical activities or art activities, while being very gentle in the way we interact with them, all of this can really help tremendously in protecting them from the toxic environment that surrounds them, and also parents too. Although I'm sure we cannot annul it, but at least we can smoothen the impact that it can have. And also what you're saying is that we should not look at children as not being able to learn and play anymore. Actually, they are driven towards that naturally, and we need to create the best conditions for that to happen in the most mindful way. And I'm going now to move to our next panelist, Didi Ananda Devapriya from Amurtel, who's been at the border in Romania from the very first days of the war, when families and children started fleeing Ukraine, to provide psychosocial support to children and parents, caregivers. Didi, I'm pretty sure that you have heard some of the things and you have vibrated on some of them. You might have also have your own experience in how you have learned about children's needs and their parents. And it would be very useful, I think, to share this with colleagues who have joined us today. So if you would have any reaction to what Solomia already said, and also what you would like to add from your own firsthand experience. Didi, you have the floor. Are you with us anymore?
Mihaela, if I may jump in before Didi, I
Yes.
did see she is with us. I'm monitoring the chat and the questions, and just to say we will address the questions after all the speakers of the first panel. So please do write your questions in the chat or in the question button there. Q&A button. Also, I didn't mention at the beginning, we have interpretation. So at the bottom, you see the interpretation. If you click, you can choose to listen into Ukraine or into English. And I read that some of you want to volunteer. Drop us a line in the chat and we will contact you if you wish to be a volunteer to translate in future events. Sorry to jump in here, but quick logistic information.
I think it was very useful, Liana. And although I have to say, I'm not seeing Didi. Didi, are you? I'm just afraid that her connection broke.
Yes, maybe she dropped out, so hopefully she joins. She was here.
She was. Well, until I hopefully she will come back. I was wondering if there is any reaction from the colleagues that have been with us by listening to what Solomia said. If there are experiences that are quite similar, be them in Ukraine or in Romania. And I'm just looking now if Ina would have any reaction to this, or if Carmen would have any reaction to this, to what she already mentioned. Please, Carmen.
Yes, hello everybody, and I'm so happy to be here together today to to share what we learn and see how we can support each other in these very hard times. We had a discussion, I had a discussion yesterday with colleagues from the step-by-step network of preschools and schools who are working with Ukrainian children and their parents. And I really want to emphasize the importance of free play and the sense of normality that comforting this kind of play offers both to children and their parents, because most of all, the children and the parents standing side by side gives them the time together, the times to learn and the times to express their emotions. And it's also in a safe place, like in the preschools or the schools, not necessarily in a classroom that puts some rules and might suggest some limits, but it's safe, it's comforting, it's their time together, it's their learning and in the same time relief. And what our colleagues share was that the language barrier, which is a challenge, it's not so present there. And among mothers, there are some mothers, and I will give you some more details when I contribute later, that speak some English. So using English to transfer and communicate as little as it takes, by just offering the space and the place for free play. It's so important when these children come to the preschool and the school.
Thank you so much, Carmen, for these insights that are coming, from the other environment where you are also trying your best to provide this kind of safe and nurturing place and mindful of the way that people are feeling and dealing with their own emotions and insecurity. Didi, welcome back. We saw that we lost you for a while, but we knew that you will be back. So I was just saying, Didi, I already introduced you, and I said that you were from the very beginning at the border and supporting families and children in those places that call them reception centers. And we just want you might have heard Solomia's, and I saw you nodding at certain points. And I would like to bridge her intervention with yours, where you would share, what has been your experience in working with children and parents at the border. So please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm here with my colleague Oscar, who's been a big part of our intervention. This is Oscar. He's a big stuffed monkey who is also our assistant emergency psychologist. So I will explain a bit what that is. We actually first came to the border thinking that we would just do an assessment and then we would figure out where would be a need for child-friendly spaces, as that's a type of intervention that we have done in other situations, including in Lebanon and Haiti and with the Rohingya in Bangladesh. However, when we got here, we also had the good fortune to have with us somebody I'd previously trained to be part of disaster relief response, and who since then had specialized herself as an emergency psychologist, which was a profession even I wasn't truly aware of. So what we found when we came to the border was that there was a lot of competition, you could say almost, between NGOs offering food, offering clothing and other physical items and transportation and housing and like this. Those services were really even over-covered. However, there was not specific trained people to support the immediate psychological needs of mostly women and children coming across the border. And so this is different than like child-friendly space or even psychosocial support that's offered later once the person has been able to get into a secure situation and can start to relax and maybe need support, respite care so that they can take care of themselves. So those are interventions that are very important and valid, but this wasn't the right time and space for it. And so instead, what we focused on was for her to provide this immediate psychological first aid, not to everybody. I mean, she sort of triages people as they come through to see which ones are most in need. And usually the people that are most in need are those that had pre-existing conditions, or what we've seen in the recent week is that now there's more and more people, whereas the first waves of refugees were mostly middle class, with some credit cards, money, like they were actually had resources, and they weren't necessarily leaving from places that had already been bombed. They were leaving more proactively in many cases. Now we are seeing more people that have come from Bucha, that have come from Mariupol. They're coming from places where they've been hiding, you know, in shelters, and or seeing things that are very traumatizing. And so there's more need. They're coming across shaking and sometimes just too overwhelmed to even make that initial decision to get onto a transport to a safer space. So our role, this is a transit point, it's a border. We can't offer case management or deeper services. What we offer is, I mean, we're helping them as they come to be able to get enough support they need to be able to flow through to the next point, you could say, on the chain, which is the shelters. We also go around to the shelters with, you know, with our trusty companion, Oscar, to also there where they're a little more settled. Those are like the first couple days that they can, you know, some of them already know where they're going and they want to get there as quickly as possible. And some people don't know where they're going. Those are the more vulnerable people, and they go to the transit centers or shelters. Those places they usually stay maybe just a few days, sometimes a few hours, but sometimes a few days. And so when they're there, we go and we set up different types of art therapy, other types of games. And part of the role of those games, it works better when there's enough of a group dynamic, because that shows which kids are more disturbed and are not able to interact in appropriate ways, which kids are struggling emotionally. And then Melinda, after having done some games to create that group dynamic and sort of see which children need more support, is able to focus in more individually with those children. And especially through the medium of art, similar to what our other colleague in Ukraine was saying, and just doing calming activities, you know, this can help them to get that first support in releasing some of that stress. A lot of our support to parents is to remind them that now they're safe and that we want them to be safe, and to really empower them to make their own best decisions, because part of what was happening that we felt was inappropriate was people were getting too much pressure too quickly to take different decisions that they weren't quite ready to make. As a result, we also have been offering psychological first aid, kind of an awareness training to all of the other actors that are present here at the border, including some that are from the medical services, the first responders, other NGOs, to make them aware of psychological first aid, how they also can provide it, because it's similar to medical first aid. You don't have to be a medical specialist to, you know, to do some very simple and life-saving interventions. And the quicker that people get a responsive, informed, trauma-informed response soon after the event, the better the results are. The more that it's internalized, it goes deeper, it doesn't get addressed until weeks, months later, by then it can crystallize more. I mean, the good news I've understood is that majority of people, if they have sufficient social resources within their family network, they'll recover fine without any specialized intervention. But you know, that's why the role of our Melinda and Oscar is to more identify which ones are more vulnerable, more, you know, absorbed more trauma and need that more specialized touch early on in the stage. And then ideally, we also would like to work more on making sure that the resources for the parents, all, you know, we have seen that there's some very good resources that were also published through our network that we are going to work on getting printed and distributed, so that we are offering parents resources that they can access even later when they're more settled. And we can also make sure that they get links as they start to become more clear to other social services that can follow them up, do the case management, and make sure that they're getting the access to the type of support they need. Part of that is awareness. What types of things are normal reactions to an abnormal situation, to normalize to parents and to children, you know, some of the feelings that they might be having. Like I liked the book, The Big Feelings, the flyer, The Big Feelings flyer. So it's good to be able to have these validating materials that help children and parents to sort of validate their experiences and to be able to understand that it's an abnormal situation they've been exposed to, and that they're going to have some reactions, but most of those are going to go away in time. And if they need support, then there's resources where they can get other types of support. I introduced Oscar because having this rather large and visible, this guy's really been very helpful in Melinda's efforts. She goes around every day with him. He just opens up doors. It relaxes the kids. They relate easily to the animal. Everything she's doing, you could say, has to really be done with a lot of body language, because she's not a Ukrainian speaker. We do work with translators. There's not always translators right there, but the role of having a friend like this was actually our colleague Carl's idea and initiative, but it was a brilliant move. It really seemed to create a bridge that was child friendly, even adult friendly. Like some adults are really touched by the presence of Oscar, and seem to help them also to open up and to feel more trust when they see this type of approach. So yeah, I think I covered my points. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I think it was very useful for all our colleagues who participate today to get a better grip of what really happens at the border, but also, as you were saying, it's a very heterogeneous group. We cannot put all people in the same basket. They might have reacted in different ways, some more resilient, some less resilient, some with, let's say, a baggage of vulnerability already crossing the border, some being more kind of stable in the way that they want to proceed, having already connections or a sense of a safer place where to go. So I think that we need to have this nuanced understanding of the colleagues that are coming from and friends that are coming from Ukraine. And it's the same in Ukraine. I mean, not all children react in the same way, not all parents. So I think for us as educators, primarily, we need to have this nuanced understanding and respond appropriately for those specific needs that they have. That's one thing, but one other thing that I kind of understood from also our discussions, and we do have a lot of discussions these days, is that you talked a lot about the first aid, in terms of psychological support, but then also there are different, let's say, stages of intervention as their needs are evolving, and also the feeling of security and autonomy in making decisions is growing inside parents and caregivers. So this also is a territory, let's say, of knowledge and abilities that I would say that none of the countries has been really prepared to address. What you're doing is a fantastic work, but again, it's just one organization that has taken this work abruptly from the very beginning, understanding the meaning and the need of it. But what I'm hearing you saying, of course, we know with a flower you don't make spring. We have that kind of saying. So I see that there is a huge need for equipping adults that are working in services, be that early childhood education and care, be that social support or health protection, or all these types of services that are surrounding now families and children, to be better equipped, not become specialists necessarily, but have that kind of awareness, as Solomia was mentioning, even mindful of what kind of toys we are using or the spaces we are creating and activities that we are proposing, that perhaps from a perspective of a person that has not been through such situations, they might not seem that harming. I think the best principle that we need to apply, do no harm in this period. And I think that's the part that sometimes we might not feel quite secure that we are, even well-intentioned being, that we do not necessarily provide that. I'm going to put a pause here and see, because I have the feeling that there are some questions coming for our panelists, and I think that it would be interesting to engage with our audience also in the dialogue. Liana, could you share with us some
Sure, yes,
questions?
yes.
Not sure
yes,
we can answer to all of them, but we'll try.
Exactly,
our best.
yes. I collected them coming both in the chat and in the Q&A space here, and we're happy to have with us also a journalist, Irene Caselli, who's writing the first 1000 Days newsletter. And she raised one question that echoed another question from another participant. You mentioned, Solomia, about the topics to approach or the topics to avoid, and there is a time for all. So what happens when the children themselves bring up issues that are overwhelming for them and related to the trauma they've been through? So how the question that came was, how do we support children and have a safe space when they experience the sadness and anxiety? So that's one important question. And I'll pause, but I have another one, Mihaela, if we may address the second one too. That's also very interesting.
Yeah, please go ahead, Solomia. So what is your experience? And maybe also Didi can add to that. Like, what do we do if they ask? Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'll answer in Ukrainian, and I will ask translators to translate to answer correctly and much more understandable for everyone.
So
we should all click. Yeah, we should
English
all click
channel.
on the English.
Yes.
Okay. May I start?
Yes, please go ahead.
Якщо йдеться про те, як говорити з дітьми, які починають самі відповідати і, в принципі, піднімають питання і стосовно війни, стосовно подій, які вони пережили, насправді, коли я говорила про те, що треба уникати певних тем, я мала на увазі не ініціювати їх нам, дорослим. Якщо дитина говорить, наше завдання – слухати, беззаперечно слухати, тобто не осуджувати, ставити лише уточнюючі питання, перепитувати, чи я правильно зрозумів, що ти мав на увазі. Тобто, знаєте, завдання дорослих тут – бути абсолютно вухами і повністю присвятити себе в активному слуханню дитині. Але це лише якщо дитина сама ініціює таку розмову. Тому що на стрес, який ми пережили, як дорослі, так і діти, ми по-різному реагуємо. І хтось з дітей уникає розмови і у такий спосіб переживає події. А хтось з дітей, навпаки, це все в емоціях виплескує назовні. Тому нам важливо на рівні дитячих очей, якщо дитина потребує, то дати їй фізичний контакт. Якщо дитину потрібно вислухати, поговорити з нею. І якщо ставить питання, то, знаєте, важливо відповідати чесно, відповідно до дитячого розвитку, тобто жодним чином не вживати тригерних, складних емоційних слів, але говорити з дитині правду, бо таким чином ми, окрім цього, ще й будуємо, знаєте, довірливі стосунки. І дуже важливо, коли дитина довіряє нам якісь складні емоції, питання, себе, по суті, бути з дитиною чесним, щоб зберегти ту довіру. Бо якщо дитина прийшла до нас з питанням і з розмовою, значить, вона не просто так нас обрала, значить, вона нам довіряє. І наше завдання – слухати з відкритим серцем тут.
Thank you, Salam. Thank you, Salamia. I would like Didi to see if she wants to add, or maybe Oscar wants to add. Maybe somebody talk with Oscar, not with you. If you also would want to add to something that Salamia said, if there is anything that you would like to add or extend in that on this topic. You're on mute, Didi.
I would just reinforce with what she just said, which is that similarly in PFA or psychological first aid, it is not the role to lead the discussion by asking people to talk about their traumas or asking children to talk about their traumas. It is more a listening role, and if it is coming up, I mean, the way that you do PFA, the way we train people to do PFA is to first talk about even like basic needs. No? Do you need water? You know, checking things that help to calm down, but also regulate by putting the person in touch with their physical needs. And so, but this is where we were seeing the mistakes happening. We were seeing people coming up to refugees and like, oh, were you bombed? You know, out of their own curiosity. And it's not appropriate. It's not something that you want to bring up, because it has to come out when the person is feeling safe enough that it voluntarily comes out with a trusted person in the right context where it can be addressed. Because also when people are just coming out of these situations, they're in high tension still. Once the adrenaline, once they start having those conversations, the adrenaline's going to drain, and then they're going to collapse. And so they have to be in the safe space where they can collapse. They're still just in a transition here at the border. They're not in a space where they can, it's good to collapse, no? So that's why, I mean, some people are already collapsing. They just can't keep it together, no? And that's where they need the intervention. But it's not that you want to poke that and like cause that collapse to happen when it's not appropriate to happen. So I think all of the principle here, the do no harm, like you said, but also just like, you know, allowing the interventions that we design to really be led by the needs of the people before us, and to be individualized to them, and to not make assumptions, and to make sure it's their needs that lead. And it's just like, it's the same principle that we use in child-centered education, no? That we really want the child's needs to be leading how we interact with them. In the same way, when we're doing work with traumatized children, or in a situation where the adults are also traumatized, we need to make sure that their needs are in the center stage and not the needs of the other people around them. So yeah, that's what I would add. I think it just
very much appreciated, Didi. Yes, I very much appreciate, especially the last part that you said. I think it's so important. When we talk about child-centeredness, it's exactly what this that we are talking about, responding to needs. And I think now it's becoming acute that we really follow this and we walk the talk in the way that we are approaching these young children and their parents. I would say primarily mothers, who themselves are separated from their husbands, children from fathers. So it's quite complex in that sense. Diana, I'm looking now at you. You said that you have another question, and I think it will be the only one, so that we manage to go through everything that we've planned. I know there will be so many things to talk about. Time is not generous enough for such important topics to be addressed.
Yes, and we will have further events focusing on specific topics. So to wrap up what was just shared now, I hope participants follow the chat. We have a special page on ISSA's website where we grouped relevant resources, including on this topic. And we will add also a colleague from the Fun Academy in Finland just shared a link on the chat from one of their resources. The last question on this is somehow related. The question is, do we find, from what we hear from organizations on the ground, do we find that this, what Didi shared, that perhaps there isn't enough understanding of trauma and early childhood in these first interventions, and do we have similar feedback and before from others that there isn't yet enough capacity among practitioners? And just quickly to share from ISSA's side, we do, from talking with our members in various countries, we hear that. And I just wanted to share that we are right now exploring a close partnership with Didi's organization, with colleagues from another ISSA member called Refugee Trauma Initiative, now have renamed themselves as AMNA, but also with colleagues from War Child. And we plan to launch a large effort of strengthening the capacity of practitioners in all the countries affected to offer this kind of support in addition to their regular early childhood focus. So this is from our end at ISSA, but the question really was for all the panelists. Do you have the same experience to what Didi shared, that perhaps there isn't the experience and enough capacity to offer this support yet?
Well, I will invite then Salomia or even also Carmen or Ina, if they want to share anything related to that. What is your feeling? That is it a high demand, or what kind of demand would be? And we will go actually to the sessions that talks about the professionals, and we can perhaps deep dive more there. But as a first reaction to this question, Solomia, what was your sense by working with the teachers in your kindergarten? So did you feel like there's been a huge need for this, and you had to regroup, kind of quickly and provide that kind of guidance?
Дякую. I'll speak in Ukrainian also. Ви знаєте, насправді ми дуже швидко вчимося. По-перше, завдяки нещодавній, яка досі триває, історії з COVID-19, ми всі дуже швидко змінюємо свої навички. І оце, власне, у нас всіх є присутня гнучкість. Ми дуже швидко пристосовуємося до нових умов. Зважаючи на те, що ми готувалися до війни, оскільки в інфополі про це було досить багато розмов. Ми пізнаємо трохи вже ще до війни. Ми знали, як поводитися у випадку тих чи інших подій, як дітей евакуювати. І зараз, на щастя, всі дуже добре згуртувалися, якщо йдеться про освіту, в тому числі, я маю на увазі і українську, і міжнародну спільноту, і з'являється надзвичайно багато корисних матеріалів, які допомагають нам надавати швидку допомогу тим, кому потрібно, і розуміти новий контекст і, відповідно, діяти в цьому контексті. Звичайно, що потреба в тому, як коректно поводитися в умовах війни, вона завжди в нас є, тому що ми не знаємо, що нас чекатиме ще в найближчому майбутньому. Але насправді зараз є досить багато матеріалів, і дуже багато хороших фахівців пропонують свою допомогу на безкоштовній основі, абсолютно в доступному форматі для будь-яких працівників, які там тим чи іншим чином працюють з дітьми. Тобто допомога вона завжди є потрібна, і я думаю, що якась така спільна кооперація, вона буде на часі точно.
Thank you so much, Salome. And I think this was a very good introduction for the next topic that we actually were planning to address, and that's related to the focusing primarily on early childhood professionals. So we're, Eva, I think you can share now the slides, because actually we wanted to see what are their highest priorities, or what are our higher priorities in preparing them and in supporting the early childhood workforce. Those that are in Ukraine, but also those that are in the neighboring countries. And for this part of the question, I will invite another colleague from Ukraine to join our discussion, Ina Gorbenko. I mentioned at the very beginning, a psychologist and co-founder of the Kindergarten Happy Kids, also step-by-step trainer. So Ina, you, I think, have a very close experience working with professionals, but also a direct contact with children and families. So you have both perspectives, I would say, in your daily work. We also know that the emergency and the traumatic context in Ukraine clearly asks for immediate guidance to teachers, as we have heard from Solomia, but also we see not only in Ukraine, but also in the other countries. So it's kind of the need for a kind of a quick reorganization of the way that we equip professionals with knowledge and skills, which is primarily happening online also. What has been your experience in this? I know that you have tried to support in the best way possible professionals that are working now in the kindergartens. It is very difficult conditions, and there are initiatives, but I would like for you to speak more about the one that you have experienced and how you felt that this has really helped professionals in kindergartens work. The floor is yours, Ina.
Доброго дня, шановні колеги. Найперше хочу подякувати усім людям, організаціям і країнам, які сьогодні надають підтримку Україні. І, звісно, що в тих умовах, в яких сьогодні перебуває Україна, перед нами стоїть дуже багато викликів. І чи не
Yes, we can, Anatoly. Please continue.
Я можу продовжити, так?
Так, будь ласка.
Нічого, все гаразд. І так, ще раз хочу всім подякувати, хто сьогодні надає підтримку моїй країні. І, звісно, що, враховуючи всі ті умови, перед нами сьогодні стоять величезні виклики. І чи не найбільший з них – це як підтримати найбільш вразливу категорію нашої спільноти – це наші діти. І те, що ми сьогодні спостерігаємо, дуже багато сімей виїхали за кордон. І дякуємо, що вони теж знаходять там не тільки прихисток, а й передусім психологічну підтримку. З ними працюють спеціалісти. А водночас ми спостерігаємо, як сім'ї приїжджають в західну частину України, і на сьогодні тут теж велике скупчення сімей саме з дітьми дошкільного віку, шкільного віку. І хочу сьогодні поділитися таким невеликим досвідом саме в підтримці педагогів, тому що сьогодні почали створюватися такі от осередки підтримки саме дітей і сімей в західній частині України. І хочу вас познайомити з проєктом дитячого фонду ЮНІСЕФ в Україні, який виконують декілька організацій. І одна із організацій – це наш всеукраїнський фонд «Крок за кроком», який долучений саме до навчального компоненту цього проєкту. Проєкт має цікаву назву «Дитячі точки спільно». Чому він так називається? І що таке дитячі точки? Дитячі точки – це якраз є осередки, це майданчики для дітей, якими займаються педагоги, які добровільно зголосилися працювати в такому проєкті. В таких осередках знаходяться діти від 3 до 9 років, і з ними працюють педагоги, тобто вихователі дошкільних закладів і вчителі початкової школи. Викликом є те, що, власне, ці осередки створюються на різних майданчиках, тобто це можуть бути і дошкільні заклади, це можуть бути і бібліотеки, це можуть бути і кімнати при соціальних службах, тобто вже в залежності від того, які ресурси є в тій чи іншій територіальній громаді, де є люди, які потребують такої підтримки, відповідно створюється такий от осередок. І на що ж саме спрямована програма, декілька слів про неї скажу. Наше завдання передусім допомогти педагогам працювати в цих нових умовах і справлятися з тими існуючими викликами, які є. В чому? Ну, перш за все, важливо розуміти, що в нас група різновікова. І в групі знаходяться дітки, яким 3 роки і може бути 9 років. І як правильно організувати те середовище, де можна було б не тільки психологічно підтримати дитину, а й передбачити всі ті активності, які були б ефективними для дітей різного віку. Далі важливо враховувати, що це діти з різним ступенем травматизації. Тобто є діти, які були свідками всіх цих подій, і з ними працюють психологи, але педагогу важливо також розуміти, як включати цю дитину, передусім, як бачити цю дитину, як розуміти, що вона наразі переживає, які в неї емоції, чому, наприклад, вона сидить і не хоче зараз ні з ким контактувати, не лякатися, коли вона малює чорним кольором, як був приклад, коли батьки злякалися, що дитина 3-річна малює чорним кольором, і вони забрали олівці, фломастери чорного кольору, думаючи, що дитина почне малювати різнобарвні малюнки, але дитина навпаки лише замкнулася, вона взагалі нічого не малювала, і тільки потім вони звернулися за допомогою до психолога. Тобто ми повинні розуміти стан дітей, розуміти ті симптоми, які можуть говорити про певний рівень травматизації, звичайно, по можливості працювати в такому тісному тандемі разом із психологами для того, щоб можна було цю якісну підтримку надавати. Але ж повернемося все-таки до педагогів. Що передбачала програма? Найперше хочу сказати, що це така 3-модульна програма, вона передбачає 3 дні навчання, і кожен з модулів він був такий тематичний, я про них трошки пізніше скажу. А програма спрямована передусім на розвиток навичок педагогів, надання психологічної підтримки дітям, на вміння формувати ось це безпечне, комфортне середовище для дітей, вміти реагувати на їхні потреби. І ми сьогодні вже говорили про те, що вони є дуже індивідуалізованими, і педагог повинен, перше, розуміти потребу дитини, друге, підбирати ті ефективні стратегії для такої індивідуалізованої підтримки. Наступний компонент – це педагоги мали можливість удосконалити свої навички у фасилітації ігрової діяльності та взаємодії з дітьми різного віку. І ще один важливий момент – це опанування саме ключових правил мінної безпеки, що для більшості, власне, є новим таким досвідом і новими знаннями. Дуже добре, що до проєкту залучені фахівці, які можуть не лише дуже грамотно розповісти про ці правила, а і допомогти педагогу підібрати саме той контент, як можна зрозумілою мовою для дітей через мультиплікацію, наприклад, пояснити, що таке мінна безпека і як потрібно безпечно себе поводити. Наступний, будь ласка, слайд, і зараз ми поговоримо трішки про ці компоненти програми. Перший модуль, він так і називається «Надання психологічної підтримки дітям в період війни». І тут педагоги мали можливість ознайомитися з першою психологічною допомогою та як надавати ось ці інтервенції дітям, з особливостями спілкування з дітьми, як створювати комфортне психологічне середовище для дітей, як реагувати там на певні реакції дитини, як спілкуватися з батьками, про що сьогодні вже говорила Соломія, та справлятися з стресом, підтримуючи і самих батьків, і навчаючи їх, як підтримувати дитину. І також цінним є те, що кожен модуль він був таким практичним. І от в першому занятті педагоги ознайомилися з практичними вправами і техніками, які можна використовувати саме в даній ситуації, працюючи з дітьми з дошкільного віку та 9 років. Наступний, будь ласка, слайд, другий компонент. Він стосувався більше вже такої методичної роботи. Називається він «Організація діяльності дітей на території майданчиків «Дитяча точка спільно». І цей модуль був зорієнтований на те, як правильно організувати предметно-просторове ось це середовище, враховуючи, що у всіх абсолютно різні можливості, і як організувати, наприклад, те середовище в бібліотеці, щоб це були і різні і осередки діяльності для дітей, і місце, де можна було б зорганізувати для них коло, тому що є важливими ось ці ритуали, початку зустрічі, кінця зустрічі, і ми про всі ці методичні речі говорили. Як правильно побудувати ось цю зустріч з дітьми, адже педагоги 2-2,5 години з ними працюють, як краще чергувати активності для дітей, щоб ця діяльність була і цікавою, і ефективною. Говорили про те, якими можуть бути ритуали початку і завершення занять, та які вправи використовувати доцільніше, враховуючи саме от той досвід, про який ми вже говорили. Опрацювали цілу підбірку різних вправ та активностей для дітей, які можна, наприклад, які ігри можна виготовити разом з дітьми, а потім пограти в ці ігри. Дуже дітям подобається створювати ігри саме з підручних засобів, коли ми використовуємо абсолютно все, що в нас є під рукою. Да? Тобто це і коробки, це і гудзики, це і кольорові там шнурівки, тобто будь-що. І насправді творчий педагог може цю активність зробити захопливою і цікавою для дітей. Тому разом з педагогами ми, власне, знайомилися з усіма цими активностями і зрозуміло, що кожен додавав ще і свій унікальний, індивідуальний досвід, що дало можливість нам от підготувати таку багату скарбничку саме для педагога на кожен день роботи з дітьми. І наступний, будь ласка, блок – це 3-й модуль нашої програми. Він стосувався саме фасилітації ігрової взаємодії з дітьми. І тут ми більше говорили саме про гру і мистецтво фасилітувати цю гру з боку дорослого, про підтримуюче спілкування, яким воно повинно бути під час ігрової взаємодії із дітьми. І педагоги разом з тим отримують практичні рекомендації, що необхідно враховувати, працюючи з дітьми в умовах війни. І от сьогодні вже піднімалося питання, як добирати саме екологічний, якщо можна так сказати, контент матеріалів для читання, для перегляду, аби він не був травмуючим для дитини. Як правильно вислуховувати дитину, якими словами її підтримувати, коли вона гнівається, коли вона плаче, коли в неї бувають абсолютно різні реакції. Якими є реакції взагалі дітей на стрес і як враховувати це в роботі? Завдання нас, педагогів, це передусім дати дітям стабільність у теперішній реальності, відволікти їх, розважити цікавими іграми і захопливими історіями. І найперше це завдання для всіх нас – створити для них саме ось цей безпечний простір, де дитина відчуває підтримку дорослого, я з тобою, ми разом, для того, щоб і знизити рівень тривожності дітей, і можна було з ними ефективно працювати. Для педагогів в рамках проєкту передбачена також супервізійна підтримка, тобто поки що перебуває навчання, вже 2 групи педагогів пройшли таке навчання, ще в нас залишилася 1 група, і після уже активного такого включення роботи з дітьми вони матимуть ще супервізійні зустрічі, де ми можемо обговорювати ті труднощі, ті виклики, які в нас виникають під час такої роботи. Дякую дуже за увагу.
We thank you also, Ina, for introducing us to this new curriculum that has been adapted to respond to the context that I suppose that you have learned from professionals working with children in different kinds of settings, what they would need in order to be able to provide such kind of activities, and what should be the priority, on what they should focus more, what they should be careful about. I think this kind of information is extremely needed also for them. And I just looked at a question in the chat, which I would like to share with you, because I think it's extremely important. As we say, you know, we need first to help the helpers. So if from what you have learned from the professionals that you have interacted with, what is their level of anxiety? You know, what are the pressures that they are feeling? Because I think it's extremely important to learn what their needs are, not only professional needs in the sense of knowing how they should work with children, what they should pay attention, what they should prioritize, and so on, but also them as human beings, being professionals, what kind of, how we can support them also in being able to fulfill their role, which is sometimes quite challenging, we might say, a place where they can also share their concerns or they can get more strength, feel more empowered to do their work. Did you have that kind of experience, or did you felt that kind of need from them also?
Ну, ми працюємо з педагогами, які переважно проживають в Західній Україні, і це люди дуже мотивовані до такої роботи. Але дуже дякую, що ставите таке запитання. Ми обговорювали такий важливий момент, що до роботи має долучатися той педагог, який справді відчуває цю внутрішню силу витримувати різні емоції, різні почуття. Тобто, передусім, ця людина сама має бути в тому ресурсному стані, коли вона може працювати. Тому що якщо педагог, слухаючи історію дитини, разом плаче з ним, а таке теж може бути, одна річ, коли це одномоментно відбувається, і це нормально, коли ми плачемо, і нормально відчувати те, що ми відчуваємо в цій ситуації. Але інша справа, коли педагог повністю розбалансований, і він тільки те й робить, що плаче, то звісно, що він сам потребує цієї психологічної допомоги перед тим, як включитися в роботу з дитиною. Тому ми обов'язково це проговорювали. Звісно, педагоги висловлювали деякі побоювання стосовно того, щоб не нашкодити дитині. Да? Для багатьох, наприклад, було відкриття, і вони дякували за практичні рекомендації, було відкриття, що, наприклад, елементарна гра в кубики, коли дитина щось будує, да, і хтось там тронув цю пірамідку з кубиків, вона зруйнувалася, а дитина, наприклад, була свідком того, як руйнується будинок, і для неї це теж може бути тригером, для неї це теж може ця ситуація викликати дуже такі глибокі почуття, і дитина починає сильно плакати, нам потрібно з цим щось робити. Тому нормально, я вважаю, що ці побоювання є, але дуже цінно, що педагоги ці побоювання висловлюють, тому що саме в професійній спільноті ми можемо це обговорити, надати підтримку один одному і бути готовими до тих чи інших ситуацій. Насправді це цінно.
Thank you, Ina. And believe me that we would want to expand more on these topics. However, we would need to move ahead. And now I will turn to Carmen Lica from the Step-by-Step Center for Education and Professional Development, a leading organization in the early childhood field in Romania, with an extended experience of working with professionals, not necessarily in this context, but now perhaps, it's kind of a testing time now, this period when it becomes even more acute, the need for professional support and how fast we can move and how we can take from all our rich luggage of knowledge and expertise and capacities in the system to enable them to respond in the best way possible to such challenging situation coming from bringing people in a foreign territory with very little hopes and a lot of insecurity. Carmen, I would like you to talk us a little bit more about your experience while trying to find best solutions. I know that you have helped a lot of families who fled to find shelter and create some spaces where parents and children can benefit of activities, and bringing professionals to organize such kind of an activity. So kind of a very immediate reaction, let's say, an immediate support. However, I know that you're also thinking on a short, mid, and long-term perspective. And by looking at the professionals, because we know that a lot of professionals from Ukraine also fled and they find themselves in Romania and also in the other countries. I just wanted to hear also, how do you look at the issue of supporting professionals, Romanian professionals that are in the system and want to do whatever is best for the families and children, but also the Ukrainian professionals that have fled. Have you had some thoughts about how we can bridge this expertise? And this is a topic we will come back also in the second session of today, more in depth with our colleagues from Ukraine. But just get a bit of a grip. We know that language is an issue. I mean, there could be very good professionals, but they might not speak. No, professionals in Romania with professionals in Ukraine might not have a common language of understanding. So how do we come with a solution to this? Or if there is no solution now, what actually we should do at the time being, you know, so that we still provide that kind of support?
I would say that probably each situation has its own solution. I think it just takes the energy to look for the solution. So I will share with you what we did, what we experienced, and what we did in Romania. So we started to offer services from the very, very beginning when we were asked by a hotel who hosted over 200 young mothers with their children. There were children like from newborns to 16-year-old children. And the hotel very quickly understood that they need to offer some programs for the children. So we basically asked the teachers that work in our own preschool and primary and low secondary school to volunteer their time to come work with the children in the hotel. And also our colleagues in the office volunteered their time to come and help and assist. And absolutely the language was a real barrier from the very beginning. Not so much in talking with children, because play is this wonderful international language. So we managed to offer this great time for children, but it was a challenge in communicating with parents. So what we did was we started to identify those mothers who had some English, and they were able to talk to us in English. And with their help, we managed to identify among the big group of mothers who was hosted in the hotel, some who were qualified as teachers. So we basically used the mothers who are speaking English to facilitate communication between us and the mothers who are qualified and who are willing to volunteer their time next to our colleagues to work with children. So this was one kind of situation, and this way we managed to facilitate also both the learning experience of the children and the communication with parents. This was one type of experience. It's the second experience that we have with the children that come and attend classes and participate in activities in our preschool and in our school. And we were approached by a community of mothers. And from the beginning, some of them volunteered because they were speaking English. They volunteered their time in both preschool and school as teacher assistants, not necessarily being qualified, but having a knowledge of English language. And we understood together that it's very important for them to look into the community of mothers and identify those who are qualified as teachers and whom we are very willing to hire as teachers. And in order to be able to hire, being part of the education task force at the Ministry of Education, we raised the issue to find the legal solution so they can be hired as qualified staff in our educational units. And it's the situation that we face in the step-by-step network all over the country. And for our colleagues in the network, it's a little bit more difficult, because being public institutions, for them, the challenge, because part of the COVID restrictions are still in place. So basically allowing parents to be part of the activities and to enter the preschools and the schools, it's a little bit challenging. So this puts an extra pressure on young children being alone. Some of the Ukrainian mothers are allowed. So there is a little bit more complicated, but basically we are advocating for the same approach to identify in the beginning those mothers who are speaking English and can facilitate communication among Romanian teachers and Ukrainian parents and children. And then with the help of the mothers and also with the support from the county school inspectorates to identify those mothers who are qualified, or even they're not mothers, taking their children to educational units, but maybe if they are qualified as teachers, preschool or primary school teachers, willing to work and interested to work, because we learned that there are a lot of Ukrainian mothers interested to get a job, to be able to get a job in the preschools and the primary schools where Ukrainian children are, so they can really contribute to offering them a powerful learning experience.
Thank you, Carmen. I think that you pointed to at least to two aspects that I think are extremely important, that there could be some policy barriers in really trying to absorb, let's say, professionals that fled Ukraine in the systems of the receiving countries. And that could be something that would need to be considered and discussed in each of the countries on how we can create these pathways for their smooth integration as if they want to settle in that country. And that was the second point actually that I wanted to point out to, that it is still a situation in flux. I mean, for many of the families that they do not know how long they will stay, if they want to stay. So I think that that's also something that the system can be ready, and then it should be possible to happen for those that do want to. But I think at the moment is by really mapping out who is in each of these communities and how we can identify those that are willing to help or those that have the capacity to help. They should have that opportunity given. And I think that what you're saying, there is a bit of limitation in certain services to be hired, or that could be, they could work as volunteers or they can work as assistants, and even as assistants, perhaps not always, because of the other rules that apply in not in having adults in the setting. And I think that's an important part also. If we just think, because I have sometimes the feeling that we're doing things not necessarily taking the perspective of the mothers and the children that have experienced this, that we prepare things that maybe they are not ready for. So even in the case of parents and children, there might be situations when they don't want to be separated. So even if mothers would want to, they don't feel like doing it. I mean, they could be capable, let's say, to do it. They do not necessarily want that. So there are some solutions that are viable solutions, but I think that they need their time to come when families are ready to approach them or to embrace them. And obviously, this might take some time, and we need to have patience for that and for them to work. But I very much like what you mentioned, that as an immediate reaction, mapping out, finding at least the viable solutions for this period of time, with most of respect and mindfulness for the perhaps limitation in making a decision right away of mothers having 1 or 2 or 3 children, and sometimes are not just mothers. I mean, there are other members of the families that can be with them, not necessarily mothers. And I think they can also be resourceful as long as they are close to their children. I think they feel much more comfortable. But I think also other Ukrainian or children from Ukraine, I think also gives them the feeling, like Ina was mentioning, they are motivated to do. Professionals feel like, I really feel like I want to do this. It keeps them, afloat in the situation, and contributes to kind of focus on what I can do, not on what is really damaging for my soul and my mind. And so I think that's the part where for the refugee mothers also might matter. Yes, Carmen, you wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to say that I think it takes time, like, for example, to put in place all the procedures so we can hire these people. But this is something that we realize it's important to pay attention to, and it's something we are working with together with the Ministry of Education. So I think it's very important to pay attention, as you already mentioned, to what we need to do and what are the expectations and the momentum for the mothers, qualified or not, to be with their children, to be separated. So I think it's very important to pay attention to all the information around us and respond to what is needed.
And we will get back to this topic
Sure.
later in the second session, where we will talk about, what solutions are there, what type of services, what's the capacity to provide it, what are the shortages that are actually limiting ourselves. But also have colleagues from Ukraine and also from the Ministry of Education talking a little bit more about the early childhood workforce in Ukraine who fled and who is still in Ukraine, and what are, from the ministry's perspective, ways of supporting them, be that in the country or outside the country. Before we will wrap up this first session of today, maybe we can take just one question if there is, Liana. I'm bringing you in, or...
Yes, there has been a very important question raised by our colleague Don Vertley. Any of the panelists, can you share about children with special needs? How do they fare in this situation, and how are they addressed in this massive effort to provide support, whether they are in Ukraine or in Romania?
Let's see, whom would like to bring the perspective of, I think it's such an important issue, because as we were saying at the very beginning, we should not put all the people in the same basket, and children with special needs are also a very special category of children that would need additional support. And I think that there is a risk of being neglected or not necessarily being aware of the additional type of support that they should benefit from, either in Ukraine or when they are fleeing, or they have fled Ukraine. I think somehow we talk about children, kind of melting down the age groups and the needs and the different types of vulnerabilities, which is very risky. So I thank Dawn for bringing up the issue. Let's hear if Ina or Salomia would want. I don't know if you have had experience, or if you have had children that are with special needs in your settings, and if you can share something, or from the perspective of their parents. Whom of you would like to bring some ideas? Please, Salomia.
Actually, we do not have kids with disabilities, so I actually do not have any experience of how to work with those kids. Maybe some of other colleagues will help me to answer.
Ina, would you, or it's the same situation? Because if not, maybe you can
в
address
садочку
it.
діти з особливими освітніми потребами є, але садочок в Києві, він зараз не працює. Я знаходжусь в Західній Україні зараз і трішки займаюсь волонтерством. І серед тих дітей, до яких я приходила, до сімей, є дитина з особливими освітніми потребами. Ну, для мене, як і для багатьох, дитина з особливими освітніми потребами – це передусім дитина. З такими ж потребами, вона точно так потребує цього захисту, підтримки. І спілкуючись з мамою, те, що вона сказала, що для мене наразі навіть не важливо той комплекс реабілітаційних послуг. Я дуже вдячна, що ми зараз в безпеці. Ну і зрозуміло, що мама більше навіть потребувала такої психологічної підтримки для того, щоб залишатися в стабільному стані, щоб можна було надавати підтримку своїй дитині. Тобто тут не стільки мова йде вже про той повний комплекс додаткових якихось втручань, як стільки забезпечити максимально той емоційний комфорт для родини конкретної, для дитини, а потім, звісно, все це ми можемо надолужити. Тому в умовах війни такого великого досвіду роботи з дітьми з особливими освітніми потребами наразі не маю, але от ця родина дуже так зараз пригадалася конкретно, з якою мала можливість спілкуватись.
Well, I think that I don't want to treat this topic as too superficial. So I think it would deserve more attention and bring perhaps in discussion people that have had more experience and have put a lot more thought on how we should address the complex vulnerability that especially families having children with disabilities are going through. As having been confronted also with the war experience. So, well, I know that there will be many things to discuss, and I think that we have tried to answer to some of the questions that we planned for. No, I think the questions we planned for today we have managed in this session. There will be many others to follow in the second session where we will, let's say, focus more on the part, on institutional part and response in terms of services and ways of supporting the services. I think that with this, I will hand it over to Diana for closing this first session and hoping you will come back.
Thank you. And this is actually what I wanted to reinforce, that not only are we having a second session today, but we plan to have more such convenings, more such ISSA Connects for Ukraine gatherings online. So just a reminder that we have a break. It's now less than 30 minutes. It's going to be approximately 20 minutes, so we meet again on the hour, wherever you are in the world. A reminder to all of you that you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, on our website. So sign up to our newsletter to receive news about future such events. And we will come back in the second session. I think the next slide shows our next topic. We will look again at very practical experiences from the ground, this time also from Poland, Ukraine, Romania, also from Poland, at local responsive and agile solutions to meet these needs, also working with the local government. So enjoy your break, have a nice cup of tea, go for a walk if possible where you are. We all need to look after our own well-being as well, and hope all of you can join us back for the second session. Perhaps we will be joined by more colleagues who couldn't attend the first. So thank you to all the presenters, thank you to the partners, thank you to our wonderful translators, Anatoly and Tatiana. You're doing a great job, we're very grateful, and see everyone in 20 minutes. Hello again to all colleagues who have joined. We will wait just a minute or two so we give more colleagues the chance to join. We know that some participants were able to join only for this second session, so we will probably have some new colleagues joining us as participants, and I see that many have stayed on from session one. So again, let's just wait one more minute or two so we are being joined by more colleagues from around the world. And in the meantime, do the same thing if you can. Use the chat to write where you join from. if you have been part of the first session, you can share some insights or a key takeaway from the first session for you. It will be great for us to see what you found interesting, what surprised you, or what inspired you. So please do share in the chat if you have attended the first session. We want to hear from you so it can inform our plans and our efforts for such events in the future. And it's of course also very interesting to see who is with us. So where you work, in which country you are, what are your efforts to support Ukrainian children and their families. So again, this event is being offered by ISSA. We are the network for Europe and Central Asia. We have member organizations across the continent, and of course, also in the countries that are most affected now by the war in Ukraine. Ukraine itself, the neighboring countries, and countries further away where families are finding refuge as they flee from the war. And today we are offering these two sessions under the title Responsive Solutions in Early Childhood, Learning Across Borders. And as the title mentioned, that's exactly what we hope, that we learn from each other. We use lessons learned and we share so that we can all be much more efficient and effective in our efforts. We are partnering with our member organizations, and in the next slide you see who they are, our member organizations in Ukraine, the Ukrainian Step-by-Step Foundation, and also member organizations in Poland and Romania, Comenius Foundation, and the Step-by-Step Center for Education and Professional Development. And also with the partner from Ukraine, we hope soon, also a member organization, the Institute of Education Development. So together we have planned the topics, we have planned the way to organize this learning exchange and this opportunity for all of us to hear from the ground insights, challenges, solutions, also dilemmas for which we haven't yet found solutions. With this introduction, again, our aim is to connect and learn together, and we hope to put together more such events and offer more such events. Do share in the chat if you have suggestions for us, ideas, what we should focus on. We picked up from the first session that we definitely have to have a deeper insight into how children with special needs are faring in this very challenging time. So we will look to you also for suggestions for the future as we continue as a network to do what we can, what is in our power, that is to connect, to share, to advocate, to convene, and to provide this space for learning. With this, I'm going to, again, my name is Liana Gens, Director of ISSA, if you have joined us just now. And I would like to now pass it on to my colleague, ISSA's Program Director, Mihaela Ionescu, who is the moderator also for session 2, and who will share with us not just what we will focus on in session 2, but perhaps, Mihaela, also some key takeaways from session 1 as we transition to session 2. So over to you.
Thank you, Liana. And again, a warm welcome for those that have joined us in the second sessions, and many thanks for those that stayed with us from the first session. Perhaps primarily for those who did not join the previous session, I would like to briefly summarize by saying that while rapid actions have been taken to adjust the learning environments for children and to provide them with attuned activities, mindful of the psycho-emotional fragility of children and parents, there is a high demand for equipping professionals with the sufficient knowledge and skills on psychosocial support when interacting with children and their caregivers, but also to create mechanisms to cope with possibly overwhelming emotions for professionals working in services. The context also is very fluid. There are lots of good initiatives that have taken off, and they can serve as learning experiences of what is mostly needed and how they can be best addressed. I think we are in a period in which we are trying to understand and equip ourselves with the best knowledge of how we should lay out in the next period support and services that best meet the needs of, there are also changing needs of children and families who are in Ukraine or have fled Ukraine. Being mindful of these real needs of those who are living in work conditions or those who fled, by employing also a strength-based approach. I think it's very important that we mentioned briefly in the first session that we should avoid putting, them in a big basket saying refugee children or refugee parents, or I think that they are human beings with a lot of capacities, with a lot of potential, with a lot of, they have a rich luggage of experience, and this has to be taken into consideration when also proposing solutions to them, and perhaps incorporate them in delivering such kind of solutions. There are policy barriers, but also practice barriers. And I think that some of these also have been highlighted in the previous session, but I'm certainly sure that we will address a bit more of this in the second session, which actually will take forward the discussion towards more towards the readiness of the early childhood systems to welcome the refugee children and their families in the neighboring countries, as we will have this time in the discussion colleagues from both Romania and Poland, but also we will refer to bridging the expertise, the importance of bridging the expertise between Ukraine and other countries, but also inside the country. So how we can co-construct these solutions by getting together at the table and learning from each other, and being highly responsible for the work that all of us are doing in different capacities as stakeholders in the early childhood systems. Let's move to the next slide, and I will just introduce briefly our panelists for today, and then we will hear as we will navigate through the topics. We'll have again Carmen Lica, Director of the Step by Step Center for Education and Professional Development in Romania. You have heard her in the first session. We're welcoming in this second session Teresa Ogrodzinska, the Director of Comenius Foundation in Poland. We're happy to have Oksana Savitska, for state experts from the Ministry of Education and Science in Ukraine, and Natalia Sofi, Deputy Director of the Institute of Education Development Ukraine, the co-host also of this event. Well, let's move to the next session, next slide, Eva. So the question that we are there will be several questions to try to answer today. The first one that we are starting with, as we talked about the readiness of the systems, is how ready the local governments are to address the multiple challenges of the refugee families with young children. As we know, in most of the cases, the early childhood services are managed by the local governments, and therefore their readiness to provide a valid solution or valid solutions for them is quite vital. Move to the next slide. And when I mean readiness of the local governments, I refer to the capacity or even the routine they might have to map the needs in terms of to map the capacity at the local level in terms of spaces, in terms of workforce, in terms of funding, to map the programs that exist, but also to activate or to build local partnerships so that together solutions are co-constructed, identifying the policy barriers, but also mindful of the existing shortages in the early childhood system that we know about. I mean, there is in terms of availability of places, in terms of workforce shortage, or even in terms of funding. But that's the way of really coming up with solutions that are going to be valid, and they can be responsive, and they might need to be flexible, and they might not necessarily be formal, or they might become formal, but first perhaps they can start by being informal and non-formal, so that we ensure a smooth transition of families that have settled in different communities. Next slide, please, Eva. I want to bring in the discussion, because it was mentioned, the issue of partnership. And that's something that I learned recently from a recent research that has been carried out. You have all the details in the slide, that led to the development of 5 guiding principles for effective partnerships in education in emergency. I just want to say there are many organizations that have worked on this issue for quite some years. Unfortunately, because of having to address this issue of countries that have been in conflicts and in different types of crises, natural disasters also. And there's quite some knowledge existing already. However, this research and these principles have been published this year, and they are talking about 5 of them around effective partnerships. And I think this, as during the COVID pandemic, I think that partnerships were also kind of coming out as being extremely important, and especially at the local level. So how different types of stakeholders or different types of organizations are coming together to provide, to make services adapt quicker, or families and children benefit of the services. And these 5 principles, I think they were quite enlightening, as they were mentioning about care, but care in the sense of how partners are interacting and approaching the work together by pointing out primarily to kindness, empathy, and thoughtfulness. The second principle was about trust and respect, where there's a recognition that all partners are holding strengths and capacities to conduct their work. The third one was about communication. It was said that the collaboration is essential, but there has to be authentic communication and organic communication, so that the actions the measures or the actions that are planned are smoothly implemented, being supported by this ongoing and organic communication. The 5th one was about self-reflection, which was more about, because they know that in partnership, there's always a lot of power dynamics, and the self-reflection was meant based on the principle of trust and respect, so this self-reflection, there is a lot of interrogation of the power dynamics and assessing the power asymmetries through this self-reflection. And the 5th one was about mutual learning, that partners are effectively sharing the knowledge, and they learn more from one another, because in such context, there's much to be offered, and there's much that can be built together by bringing in this collective efforts, different types of partners, public or private, with different types of expertise, or those that have already provided solutions that are not necessarily the ones that are promoted nationally, let's say. With this short introduction, actually, and we can move to the next question, to the next slide. We are trying to answer now to this following questions. I apologize. With this questions in mind, we want to address the first question that we had at the very beginning. How ready are the local governments to address the current challenges, and how at the local level we can mobilize this kind of expertise, how we can best equip them so that they do provide this type of solutions. And I will turn now to the first panelist in the discussion, Carmen, to share her organization's approach in working with local governments in Romania in this current situation, but also knowing the work that you have done prior to the beginning of the war and the influx of refugees in Romania. What do you think are now the priorities in working with local governments, and what are the ways in which we can best support the local governments so that they are ready for flexible solutions? So the floor to you, Carmen.
Thank you very much. I will share again our experience. So we have been from the very beginning of this situation in permanent communication, probably more now than we were before, because we tried to take a break from what happened during the COVID crisis and the pandemic, with all our step-by-step network, and also the 22 municipalities with whom we worked very closely since 2018, and also with all the other partners that we have. And we came to the conclusion that there were several challenges at the level of communities that were identified in this situation, with people fleeing out of Ukraine and coming to Romania, especially mothers with children and very, very young children. And one approach which was taken was, of course, to take care of accommodation and food, and also try to put children in preschool and school. And one issue that came very fast as a problem at local community was that we don't have enough available services for children birth to 3, for example. So we turned to our experience in the 22 communities in which we worked using the Primo Kids methodology, which is a methodology developed especially to assist communities in building a network of strong stakeholders at local community through a participative process, which we think is very important, especially in times of crisis, to contribute to develop a comprehensive early childhood development policy at community level, policy that will best answer and cater the needs, the specific needs of that particular community. The Primo Kids methodology is developed by the Jacobs Foundation. The license stays with the International Step-by-Step Association, and we were sub-granted the license, and we are using it since 2018. We started it before the pandemic. We developed it and we used it in these 22 communities during the pandemic. It started the process as we knew that we need to go through it, but the pandemic put some extra pressure on the communities, and we all learned that we need to look in very detail and pay attention to everything that happened. We learned that this process strengthened the partnerships, which are very important, strengthened the communication, and also the coordination of local stakeholders and their contribution to solve the problems. Also, all the local actors, both public, private, and civil society, non-governmental organizations, were very, very involved in offering the most appropriate solutions based on a very thorough need analysis. Probably one of the most important steps in the Primo Kids approach is the need analysis, in which is involved all the local stakeholders bringing the information that they have, and also putting on the table of the decision maker the information which was available at community level, but nobody paid really attention to. The conclusion is that adapting the Primo Kids methodology to the COVID crisis, and now to this another crisis that basically adds on the top of the previous crisis on the local communities, prove the importance of taking the time and investing the energy in the need analysis. It proves that it offers both short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions, considering the information that comes from the families as part of the need analysis, offers the flexibility while keeping the focus of being efficient, strategic, well-informed in coming up with approaches and solutions, creates inclusive services which provide for all the children in the community, not only the children coming from Ukraine. So develops inclusive services, gives the opportunity to analyze with different instruments the information and the situation to give the best perspective, and also takes into account the dynamic of the situation and the fluidity of the information and the decision maker that needs to be paired with the flexibility of the solutions that are put on the table. Also looks at the resources available in the community, the needs, and where and how can other resources can be accessed in order to respond to the needs. And what we learned is that it's very important to learn from the 22 existing communities who have been through the process. So, but this was a lesson learned later after discussing with the community hosting families from Ukraine, was that probably at the beginning was very important to organize a peer learning between the 22 communities who have been through the process and the new communities considering to start the process. So this is.
I would like to ask you, Carmen. Thank you very much. I think that it just brought a good understanding of how we can support the local governments to become readier to build such kind of solutions. I would like to ask you, do you feel that the communities in which you already have worked with the local governments and the local teams, cross-disciplinary teams, do they feel more equipped to find solutions? Do you think that they know how to approach actually the process of finding solutions, because they already know, they mapped out what were already the vulnerabilities, let's say, in the local system, and now a new challenge came on their way?
I think they are more, yes, they are more prepared. They are more open-minded to look at different types of situation, to think outside the box, and they have more courage to approach the challenging situation they are facing. And they can be a very important support for multidisciplinary teams in other communities who are facing the challenge but have never been used to get out of the way and put different pair of glasses to look at the situations and find new solutions.
Thank you, and maybe we will come back with other questions or clarifications. I will move now to our second panelist, Teresa. Teresa, you're the director of the Comenius Foundation in Poland, and your organization also worked with local governments in the past and had diverse experience of how well equipped they are on finding or adapting or tailoring existing services to populations that perhaps are not having the same level of access to services in different parts of Ukraine, especially in rural areas. But I want to ask you if you can share with us something that can contribute to creating a more enabling environment for this agile action at the local level. Because I think in Romania, countries are different, contexts are different, systems are functioning sometimes different. What perhaps is common in both countries, that local governments do have a lot of responsibility, and they do have a lot of mechanisms that are in place for governing the local systems. how well equipped the systems are and how ready they are to different challenges, now being this one, that's a question still to answer. And if policy-wise, there is an environment that allows that to happen, or there are limitations for the local governments themselves too. So Teresa, the floor to you now. What is your experience?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for invitation. My warmest welcome to our Ukrainian friends. It is very important for me that you are here with me. Thank you a lot. I will share our experience from last nearly 2 months, generalizing probably the situation, but we contacted, I think, over 20 towns and cities right now, so it is quite, I think, enough to make some generalization. First thing, it was for all of us, but also for municipalities, the biggest challenge they've ever faced. They've never had such a situation, and they had to react very, very, very quickly. What is very important, and this I would like to stress from the beginning, that Poles were very, very helpful in that. I mean that it was important for municipalities that they still have supporters from the people who invited Ukrainians to their homes, help them in different ways, and they still do this. But still, because a lot of people came, also they should create these reception centers for people who came for 1-2 nights and then travel to different direction. And still the situation is like this, that we do not know now yet how many Ukrainians decide to stay for longer time in Poland and who want to move. We are now in such a process of registration. So the situation is a little bit stable, but still very, very unknown. What is important that from the beginning, municipalities with volunteers or animators from culture centers, for example, started to organize some activities for children, and mainly for children from 5 years old. It was rather difficult to organize something for this younger group, because in Poland, these younger children are not that important, let's say, so there are not enough solutions, services for them. But still, I think that a lot of different activities is going right now for children, but it is a kind of chaotic way. So some of them are under a culture department, some of them are under social support department, some of them are connected to education, and all these streams react in different way. We just started to cooperate closer with 10 cities, and what is important, that they are very open for support, and they are very open for discussion where and how children can be engaged in different kind of developmental activities. So I talk to different departments in different municipalities, and we are looking together for the best places where children from 3 years old to 6 years old, and also mother with younger children can have some support, some space to feel safe, to meet another women or children. But also I would like to add that in each city it looks differently. Sometimes the municipality is very well organized and is very quick in looking for different solutions. Sometimes, and for me it is the best model, there is a very good cooperation between municipality agencies and NGOs, and they support each other. And for me, this is very important future model. We would like to continue. So we do not talk only on this municipal level, on this highest level, but also we contact different NGOs or different associations, because we are thinking about building a kind of network between all these entities. We start with some adaptation programs focused only on young children from birth till 3 years old, and mothers. I will talk about it later on, but right now I just want to underline that for us this cooperation with NGOs is really very, very important. And however, situation is very difficult and in fact is dramatic, I see that thanks to this we can come to a new model of organizing education and development of young children in different way. Because as I told you, we start from this adaptation phase, but we would like very quickly to move to this integration phase, but we have to be very, very careful in that. But here I see really a very, it looks very, for me, very optimistic, and I think it will be a new value in the system we would like to create. Maybe I will stop now, and if you have any question, please ask. Thank you.
Yes, Teresa, I think that you pointed out, I mean, that's also the introduction I made about how ready the local governments are and how important the partnerships are. Actually was pointing to the same idea that you have already mentioned. One thing is to react quickly now, I mean, the immediate emergency and immediate support, but also how we are laying out a more kind of a short, medium and long term at the local level, as they will look differently. They should perhaps even look differently, as communities might have different needs. But the types of solutions might vary, I mean. And I think that's very important in how these solutions are co-constructed by bringing in not only the organizations that have expertise, be them civil society, public organizations, or private partners. I think it's also important to incorporate the target group in the discussions and see what are the best solutions that suit their needs too. What Carmen was presenting about the Primo Keys approach, actually, that's the manner of working that we were trying to develop and consolidate in the life of the local governments, to look at early childhood as being a very comprehensive field that needs collaboration and coordination among different actors from different sectors, but also being public or private, all contributing, let's say, to the dynamics in a local system. And I think that's what you have also pointed out. It's so important because the needs are complex, and that requires that more partners are coming together, and that there is, as mentioned in the principles, there's a lot of trust and respect, there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of learning that happens, and together developing this kind of plans that are not short-sighted, that they're looking with a lot of very carefully on what's the pathway towards a smooth integration that favors the needs of children and families. Solutions are not always quick, but creating that enabling environment and this manner of working at the local level by partnering and bringing, having a more strategic discussion of what can be done now, what can be done next, what should follow, who can do where, and with what can contribute. I think that's the manner of working that we would like to see happening in many places. It's wonderful to hear that you're optimistic about that, because I think that there is a lot of expertise existing in many countries, and that should actually be the moment where this is brought to the table. I will pause here and see if there are questions, Liana, that come our way. If not, we can move ahead because we have a rich agenda. Let us know.
Yes, Mihaela, yes. So there was a very important question raised by Henriette. Carmen responded through chat, basically about the needs assessment and the voice of the refugee families themselves. So Carmen, perhaps you can share some more in terms of this, this process already of understanding the needs and involving the families.
Yes, I think we involved in the needs analysis using the diverse instruments like focus group, interviews, and questionnaires. We interviewed the Ukrainian families who were part of the formal services, or who approached the preschools and the primary schools, to better understand their plans in terms of how long they plan to stay in the community, and also how they understand attending the services. And what we've learned, for example, was that there are families who plan to stay in the community, but their particular situation is that they have one child who needs to go under 3 years of age, who needs to go to that kind of service, which is not available now. So the community might need to consider a complementary and alternative service for those children in this age group. And the other child is a child that is in the older group of the preschool, and the parents planning to stay are planning to enroll him in primary school. And the challenge they are facing is that the child needs a better understanding and knowledge of Romanian language so that the child can start attending primary school. So on the list is some summer programs for children who are planning to stay and going to school, or for children who are interested and families who are interested for their children to learn Romanian. So these are the kind of challenges that we are having on the list in some communities as we speak. And we are looking, in assisting these communities, we are looking for resources and partners who can support and bring in the resources and knowledge to develop this kind of services.
And Mihaela, there are two more questions, and I think they're somewhat connected. Henriette was also asking about how the children are actually settling in, given the trauma they've experienced, and a question from a colleague from Save the Children working now in Poland is somewhat related. She's asking about the enormous challenge of actually not having spaces and the need for advocacy to create more flexible spaces. And I think both Teresa and Carmen can address this because you both introduce the more flexible spaces and you advocate for those very successfully. Play groups in Poland, Primo hubs in Romania. So, and I know that Carmen has to go soon for another meeting. When maybe Carmen, you can respond first, and then Teresa can share. So, on this notion of how these children can adapt because their situation is such that it requires special attention, but also what flexible solutions and how do you advocate for those flexible solutions? The more what Mihaela described as that bridging services, the alternative type of services that need to be created now.
Well, maybe we will address it right away because we are planning to actually go towards these questions. Eva, can you please share the screen? And then we will answer soon. Because actually that's what we are planning to very nicely connect with the previous questions. What types of early childhood services are needed? And I know that we talk about different age groups and there might be different types of needs that need to be addressed. For children and their mothers, parents, caregivers, but the services need to ensure a safe and gradual integration of young children. How we best prepare also the services to be ready to welcome them and their families, and what are the challenges. Before we start this, move to the next slide, Eva. Before we start addressing these questions, I just want to point to a few things that I think will be important. When we build up these solutions, whatever they are, how flexible they are, and definitely responsive, we need to ensure that there is this gradual integration. It's not a brusque one. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not even over a week. So I think that from the perspective of the children and their families, that needs to be smoothly addressed. Ensure that the services are tailored to the needs, and we said that, but that means that they need to have a flexible design and they need to be locally driven in a framework that has to be national, that allows this flexibility. Equally important is that we avoid the segregation when such kind of solutions are provided, and then means that the services created or adapted need to provide access not only to refugee but also to other vulnerable groups, so that they are not considered services for refugee children and their parents. But also that we have to recognize that one service will not solve the complex problems of these children and their families, which means, and coming back to what we were discussing previously, that needs to be local networks of services at the local level, and they need to be led at the local level and have local governments involved in this. So with these ideas in mind, let's look now what could be this type of solutions. And we go now to Carmen and ask her what, and then we will ask Teresa, what are the solutions that you have started planning and already implemented, as you were saying, previous to this sad context, but with the same purpose of offering options to families that do not have access to services, and they deserve it. They have the right to it, but there's a shortage of places, there's a shortage of workforce, there are shortages that are kind of limiting the local systems to absorb such kind of solutions. So what has been your experience in this, Carmen, and what do you foresee as being possible to be done? Or not.
Or not.
Okay, I think if we have a good plan, so everything is possible. It's just we need a good plan and the determination to implement it. So we started services called Primo Hubs in almost all the 22 communities. We started with 12, and we are having communities as they look better to their need analysis and their communities. They understand that these services will cover part of the needs of the young children and their families at community level. The Primo Hubs are what we call a complementary service. So they address the needs mainly of the children under the age of 3 who do not attend formal services, education services. But in time, they also offer learning activities for children who are attending preschool for only half of the day. And they also offer services for parents, like support groups or meeting with different professionals, or even common activities where they share experiences, and they also have learning peer learning, and they also develop their parenting skills. I think what it is important to say about Primo hubs was that they were seen as complementary services, but during COVID, when due to health measures, the number of children attending the formal services decreased, the children who were not able, who wanted to but were not able to attend the formal service, basically attended the Primo hub, and we adjusted the activities so they were almost similar to those in the formal services. So they complemented very well the formal services during some times, and then they also offer this kind of learning experiences for children who are not enrolled. In terms of the types of service that we offer for the children coming from Ukraine, I think it's the flexibility that this kind of service offer. They are less restrictive in terms of health issues compared to the formal services. Even if looking at the formal services, we are trying to lift some of the restrictions to accommodate, as I said in my previous intervention, the Ukrainian mothers coming with their young children. But I think it's important to look at the flexibility that this kind of alternative complementary services are offering. Is the flexibility of the program, that they can attend only a number of hours per day or only a number of hours, a number of days per week, or only some specific activities because they are not organized like a regular preschool. It's also important to look at the possibility that these services, that this type of community services can expand the types of programs that they offer both for children and for parents. And here I would only underline the counseling that it's offered, because in a formal service, based on the regulation that we have in Romania, we only have a counselor coming once a week in a preschool. But here in this situation, we have the school counselor coming on a voluntarily basis every day if it's needed and if it's requested. And I think this is also very important. And also that there is not a limit in this in the number of these kind of services that can be opened in one community, because it's a matter of the spaces that are provided by local authorities, that then can be in the children's houses or the library or a museum if it's available, or any other type of service. And it's based on the time that the professionals in the community are volunteering, and everybody volunteers the time and the expertise that they are having in order to support the Ukrainian mothers and their young children.
So to summarize in a way, Carmen, these are services that are not replacing the formal services. They are kind of a continuation, complementing for those that do not benefit of those. But on the other hand, I hear a lot of volunteering, meaning that they are not part of the system, meaning that they will need to be acknowledged to have a different status, so that professionals might get really hired and paid.
They are part of the system, because all the utilities and all the maintenance of the space is covered by the municipality. There are different stages in the communities that we are working with, where some of the people get extra pay, like the pay by hour from the preschool or the school. So there are different individualized solutions. And in the meantime, with our advocacy activity, we managed to include them as part of our national resilience and recovery plan, and they will become part of the new law. And I take this opportunity to say how happy I am that we were here together today. And the moment I finish my intervention, I will have to go, because there is a meeting with the Ministry of Education and people from the Ministry of Education and a lot of non-governmental organizations and business community discussing the new law. And these complementary services will be part of the early childhood development reform part of the new law.
I think it's very important what you mentioned, because I think even if we might have beautiful ideas, they might hit the wall when we talk about policy, the policy environment that might be very limiting or for the time being a constraint rather than an enabler.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Carmen. In case you need to run.
Thank you. I really need to go.
Yes.
Goodbye. All the best
so
to
much.
everybody.
Yes.
And it was great being together. And thank you very much for this great opportunity.
It was great having you. Learned so much from you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. We move to Teresa. So Teresa, now we talked about the services that the organization in Romania, Step-by-Step Center for Education and Professional Development is promoting. But in your case, you also had a long experience in proposing alternative solutions to the former system and types of services that are, again, complementing existing one or provided in those places where they do not exist. How that experience has helped you or helps you to address the new challenge of today with having such a high influx of refugee children and families in communities where they already know how they don't have any more places in kindergarten, or there's quite low capacity to address such kind of needs. So share with us what kind of flexible solutions you have thought of or propose or consider or co-construct with partners.
Yes, I'm very happy that Henrietta is here with us, because for many years we created together with Henrietta, with her great support, a flexible form of preschool education, which was specially for rural areas. To make a long story short, together with other NGOs, we managed to add this form to our education law. So on one hand, it was a great success, but on other hand, when it became a part of education law of education, it occurred that only teachers with full preschool qualification can work with children in these forms. Which makes for now situation very difficult, because in Poland there are not enough preschool teachers, and as for Ukrainian preschool teachers, the process of I forgot the English word that you apply to get nostrification. Oh, nostrification, yes. The process of nostrification is difficult. So we started from coming back to our roots, to these alternative forms of preschool education. And this is what we propose to municipalities. These are so-called preschool animation groups, not to use education word, which is crucial here. And we will train animators who will work with children from 3 to 6 years old. So it will be a kind of non-formal activity, but following the pattern which we know that it works, because we already, thanks to our Wedrano preschool program, we have this very, very good experiences. So this is the beginning, and we are thinking about some advocacy pressure on the Minister of Education just to change, not to change the law, but maybe to add some new possibility, but it is a very complicated system. So right now we will organize this kind of activities for 5 years, 5 days per week for up 5 hours, which gives mother chance to go and work. We start with training animators. We would like to train Ukrainian animators, but also Polish animators, and we would like to work them together in one group, thinking about this integration process, which is very important for us. So we see it in such a way. And as for municipalities, they do not have any problem with this kind of services for these years, for these children up till 6 years old. As for mothers and children, we propose so-called play groups, and play groups
for the youngest ones.
For children from birth till 3 years old. And these are meetings of mothers with such a young children. They meet for 2 hours, up to 2 hours per day, for several times in the week. But we will see how this form will work. Because when we decided to check it, we have a very good experiences in Poland, in Belarus, in Tajikistan, in Kyrgyzstan. It is really a very good form for integrating mothers, for integrating children, and for child development. And this child development is crucial for us. So we decided to check this form. However, we are not so sure it will be so needed, and this preschool groups, animation groups. We talked with several Ukrainian mothers, and what they look for, it is work. So this group, it is something like maybe not too sophisticated, but if you have other priorities, you look for other solutions. So they ask us about nurseries. What about nurseries? They ask us. We have a solution for that, and we hope we will also implement it in a few months. It is so-called daily carer. It is such a form which we also, Leila, thank you for mentioning this. We started to think how we can adapt it right now. The idea is that mother takes care of 4 to 5 children, but she has to have 160 hours of training. And in our idea, it is like this, that if we train animators for these play groups and for these preschool groups, we also give chance to some Ukrainians to have experiences in working with children, which allows them to have this training shorter. Something like 120 hours, because we will give them a certificate while working with this young kids. So we discuss it with a group of Ukrainian in Łomianki, and it looks that they are very much interested in this solution. And also because in our so-called special law on Ukrainian crisis, this form, this daily carer, is mentioned as one of possibilities. So we also would like to discuss with ministry how, in what way they can support development of this form. Yeah. So
thank you very much, Teresa. I think that well, I very much appreciate the fact that you're saying you're looking for solutions. So it's there's still, it's work in progress. I think that now we are just looking around what we already know that it worked and how it can be adapted. And what you have just described shows that. But I also noticed in what also Carmen and you said, that it's so important that we look at those structural barriers that actually are not enabling such kind of solutions to happen, so that we can advocate. And now, since there is an appetite for adjusting some of the bylaws, if not laws, that can enable such kind of solutions, it's so important, based on really knowing what has worked, but also how those solutions that have been already, or types of services that have been created for other reasons, are matching the needs of the population that we are now welcoming. A good point that you made also, it's about mothers, because I think that this becomes a very complex issue in itself. I mean, they need to provide for the family. I mean, having 1 or 2 children, or even more than that. They are also under a lot of pressure for this, being having a high responsibility, but also wanting to be sure that services that are provided to their children are of quality. I mean, what we are talking here, we are putting quality as being, you know, the kind of the baseline of any discussion. I mean, there's nothing that we would create or would suggest if it's not complying with the standards of quality, be that formal, informal, or non-formal services. So I think that's very important to mention, because we've been advocates for quality for so many years. And I think that stands equally in the discussion we are having today about how we can propose such kind of solutions. Equally important being that they are inclusive. So what you have stressed so much, how we can easily make the process of integration, if they are planning to stay, you know, to settle, how all these services are actually bridging services that are helping them in the process of feeling welcomed and getting more confident to move around in the environment, new environment where they find themselves. Yes, please.
May I add, because when you mentioned this quality, thank you very much, because it is always very important for us. And I forget to add that for us in this situation, it is also a new learning situation, because we do not have expertise and knowledge how to work with people, children with trauma. And we started to work on that. We are looking for materials. We hope that the ideas invented by ISSA will come to the solution soon. But still, in our training for animators, and we do hope that majority of animators will be Ukrainians. We have also such offer to them that each week they can meet online with our coach, with pedagogues and psychologists who can discuss with them problems, difficult situations, support them also in this difficult situation. So we just for now, we added this component of this supporting, of this coaching on regular, very regular basis. They will have contacts weekly. And I think it is also very important thinking about this quality. Thank you.
We definitely wanted to underscore it, because it's equally important for us too. And as you mentioned, Teresa, we discussed in the first session that there is a huge need for this kind of training, of equipping all those that are working with the children and families on the principle of do no harm and provide the psychosocial support that they need. I will make a pause here and see, Liana, if there is any question we might want to address so that we can move forward to our colleagues from Ukraine.
No, all the questions that were shared were already addressed. I think one just came in now, a general question from Irene to all. There is a generic narrative of children and mothers as victims in the media especially, and listening to the solutions that seem to be happening on the ground is giving me a lot of hope, she says. So how much can these solutions really help children and carers to not get lost and to not remain as victims? So I guess her question revolves around the issue of empowerment, and as also Henriette mentioned, directing the support to the actual needs, but not in a top-down approach, but in an empowering approach. So Teresa, over to you.
Teresa, you're on mute.
Our last program we developed in our foundation, the title is Kids Go Outdoor. And these are lessons. Children go out from preschools, from schools, well, at least once a week for 3 hours, regardless of weather, in some real nature. And this program occurred to be fantastic, especially in between pandemia time, and gave a lot of very good experiences, how children with special needs can adapt, can show their talents, be accepted by community. And we will add this component to our preschool animation groups. So this coming out, well, we do believe that nature can be a kind of medicine. It can cure. And we have very good proof for that. And children are much more happy and open when they are free. So just add this this one component.
Thank you so much, Teresa. And I think continuing to what you were saying, I think that we play also a very important role to contribute to this narrative and contradicting that all those that have fled the countries, they are complete human beings that are capable of wonderful things. And there's a lot of potential there that should not be necessarily shadowed by the image that we have that they have fled a war. It is a traumatizing experience, but we should not just reduce their lives to this perception that we have about them. They might be ready and willing to contribute to improving their own lives in the places where they have settled. And they are perhaps very determined to do that. So I think that we also play this role of bringing up a new light and a new understanding of what it means to be a person that fled your country and tried to settle, and how the others can also be empowering you of expressing your view and your need, and how you can contribute to solutions. Not only others can do solutions for you, but also that you are part of the solution. Thank you so much, Teresa. Liana, I think we can move ahead.
Yes, I think definitely, yeah.
So and this will be the last question that we are addressing today. I'm very happy to welcome the last two speakers of today, Oksana Zavitska from the Ministry of Education in Ukraine, and Natalia Sofi from the Deputy Director in the Institute for Education and Development. And the last point the last discussion that we would like to have today is about how to bridge the Ukrainian. Move ahead, Eva, on the slides. How to bridge the Ukrainian early childhood expertise within the countries and across the countries, so that we can sustain the workforce capacity to overcome the challenges. There's a lot of expertise inside Ukraine. There's a lot of expertise outside Ukraine in the receiving countries, and we need to create these spaces where a lot of co-creation, a lot of learning happens, a lot of support and empowerment among the early childhood professionals exist, and how the challenges that are going to unfold, it's not, the needs are emerging, the challenges will unfold, how we collectively respond to that and support each other. And I will ask first Oksana to share with us from the perspective of the Ministry of Education in Ukraine, because we know that a lot is happening. Perhaps people are not necessarily aware of how much effort is put there also to support professionals, and what are the challenges that you're encountering, but also how you support kindergarten teachers in Ukraine, and also those that have fled Ukraine. So Oksana, the floor is yours, and we look forward to hear from you.
Добрий день, шановні колеги, друзі. Я дуже вам дякую за те, що ви організовуєте подібні заходи. І особливо дякую спікерам, що знаходять час для того, щоб долучатися. Я дуже відгукнулась у мене доповідь попередньої спікерки Терези. І я для себе зробила такі, схопила себе на інсайті, що в нас насправді дуже спільні, багато дуже спільних викликів в системі дошкільної освіти, і безумовно ми стоїмо на порозі формування нової системи. Наразі вона в Україні дуже складна, така собі консервативна, я би сказала. Але на відміну від інших країн, які зараз приймають наших діток, і вони більш розкуті в плані того, що вони можуть апробовувати нові форми здобуття дошкільної освіти. Через те, що в Україні тривають воєнні дії, ми в цьому плані дуже обмежені, тому що ми не знаємо, як ситуація може обернутися наступного дня, і ситуація дуже швидко міняється, і це нас обмежує. Більш того, я навіть спіймала себе на думці, що, пані Тереза, очевидно, ви зараз опробовуєте в себе в країні той досвід, який після війни ми зможемо у вас переймати для того, щоб облаштовувати в умовах обмеженої інфраструктури, обмежених кадрів, для того, щоб організувати здобуття дошкільної освіти наших діток в повоєнний час. Тому спасибі вам велике за це, і я, скоріш за все, буду описувати ситуацію з більш точки зору політичної, з центрального рівня, ніж з точки зору муніципалітетів, оскільки саме муніципалітети відповідають зараз за організацію дошкільної освіти в конкретних регіонах. Ну і щоб зрозуміти загальний контекст, з яким ми зіштовхнулися зараз, то я, мабуть, наведу деякі статистичні дані, щоб розуміти масштаб тієї трагедії, тієї унікальної ситуації, з якою ми зараз стикнулись. До початку війни, станом на 1 січня 2021 року, в Україні працювало 15 335 закладів дошкільної освіти. Це дуже велика кількість, насправді. Вони були, ці заклади, як комунальні, так і приватні, і в них перебувало 1 мільйон 150 тисяч дітей. Наразі абсолютно більшість закладів дошкільної освіти після 24 лютого вони припинили освітній процес. Лише близько 250 закладів, це оперативна інформація, яку ми збираємо своїми силами в міністерстві, близько 250 закладів в регіонах, де ситуація відносно безпечна, вони продовжують приймати діток в звичайному режимі. І десь близько 1700 закладів здійснюють надання освітніх послуг дистанційно або в інших змішаних формах. Тобто решта дітей і решта педагогічних працівників, вони наразі не працюють. Така ситуація в Україні сьогодні. І з огляду на те, що в Україні тривають воєнні дії, ми також умовно можемо, щоб люди, які не в контексті українських реалій, розуміли, що умовно Україна зараз поділена на два регіони. Це західні регіони, які приймають внутрішніх переселенців, тобто ті люди, які лишають території, де йдуть активні дії, і не полишають територію України, вони концентруються концентруються на території цих західних регіонів, вони шалено перевантажені. До прикладу, от за останніми даними на початок квітня, кількість внутрішньопереміщених осіб в ці регіони сягла 7,1 мільйона осіб. 7 мільйонів осіб. Це шалена цифра для цих регіонів, тому що цей західний регіон, він в сукупності своїй менший за той, де тривають воєнні дії. Решта, і ми маємо розуміти, що ці люди, вони спиняються там на певний час, хтось лишається, хтось йде. Тобто ми обмежені в організаційних формах здобуття освіти ці категорії дітей, тому що ми не знаємо, куди далі. Так, я почала чути перекладача у себе на фоні. Я перепрошую, це організаційний момент. Так, спасибі. От, і інші регіони, де тривають активні бойові дії, це східні регіони, Північний Схід, Південний Схід. Там взагалі мова не йде про освіту, тому що це там наразі питання не номер один. Наразі там для дітей і для їхніх батьків питання номер один – це фізіологічні потреби, це потреби в безпеці, в першу чергу. Коли в нас спрацьовує інстинкт самозбереження, ми навряд чи думаємо про те, що дитині треба давати розвиток і таке інше. І ми абсолютно свідомі, ось ця полярність проблематики, ми намагаємось максимально сконцентрувати свою увагу саме на тих регіонах, де відбувається таке скупчення дітей, батьків, я маю на увазі західні регіони. Що ж стосується найбільшої проблематики, найбільшого виклика в цих регіонах, це те, що в садочках, в дитячих садочках насправді бракує місць для того, щоб прийняти всіх дітей, які туди переїхали. Дистанційна форма освіти для розвитку, вона для цієї категорії дітей є винятковою, вона неприйнятна, тому що це, ми всі знаємо, що це той вік, коли дітям треба спілкуватись, коли їм треба перебувати в оточенні однолітків, дорослих і таке інше. Але наразі маємо те, що маємо, ми використовуємо цю форму як найбільш доступно. І через нестабільні ситуації наразі ми не можемо вирішити ці питання, зокрема інфраструктурно. Ми не можемо почати будувати якісь місця, ми не можемо почати облаштовувати інші будівлі в муніципалітетах під ці потреби, тому що навіть жити людям, які приїздять в ці регіони, доводиться в тих же закладах освіти, які зараз їм слугують тимчасовим житлом. Зі свого боку, міністерство розуміє, що в різних регіонах може бути різна ситуація щодо вільних місць в цих садочках, і ми рекомендуємо муніципалітетам, звісно, зараховувати дітей для того, щоб дати змогу батькам йти працювати, бо вони лишені звичних ресурсів для економічного благополуччя. І знов-таки за оперативною інформацією на початок квітня десь близько 1000 дітей було прийнято до закладів освіти, які продовжують працювати в цих регіонах. Тому насправді весь тягар сьогодні лягає на батьків щодо догляду за своїми дітьми, і ми намагаємося як міністерство підтримати муніципалітети в тому, що треба підвищувати обізнаність батьків, тому що подекуди вони абсолютно не готові надавати підтримку своїм дітям. Вони не готові через те, що вони самі психологічно травмовані. І питання психологічної підтримки зараз взагалі номер один у нас в країні. І ми розуміємо, що нам доведеться реформувати, трансформувати абсолютно всю систему нашої психологічної підтримки. В нас бракує кризових психологів, в нас взагалі бракує психологів, тому що ми розуміємо масштаб цієї проблеми. В нас не буде нетравмованих дітей, абсолютно не буде. Більш того, піднімали на попередніх сесіях питання інклюзивного навчання, і я можу тут сказати, що з нашою експертною групою в міністерстві щодо інклюзивної освіти ми говоримо про те, що має бути окремий рівень підтримки для дітей з психологічною травмою, і ми маємо готувати педагогів наших до роботи в майбутньому. Там ми мислимо стратегічно до роботи з цією психологічною травмою. От, що ми робимо? Ми розуміємо, що батькам треба дати якийсь пул матеріалів, дуже простий, дуже доступний, для того, щоб вони могли у разі їхньої потреби не шукати десь це на просторах інтернету, але ми розуміємо, що інтернет в регіонах, де йдуть бойові дії, його може і не бути, а в більшості випадків його нема. І ми прагнемо допомогти і намагаємось дуже швидко створювати якісь альтернативні абсолютно форми. До прикладу, в нас є телеграм-канал, де щодня начитують дітям казки, які перебувають в бомбосховищі. Тобто мами можуть вмикати радіо, до прикладу, і там ловити цю хвилю і слухати ці казки. Розуміємо, що потребують дуже великої психологічної підтримки. Ми робимо постійні онлайн-зустрічі з сертифікованими психологами на сторінках Фейсбуку з години дня до 8 години вечора. Ті, хто потребують, можуть долучатися. На всіх каналах інформаційних, міністерських, на YouTube-каналі, в Фейсбуці, все, що може бути доступне, телеграм-канали. Ми підготували серію інформаційних матеріалів з нашими провідними українськими психологинями, відеоінструкції, інфографіка, як підтримати дитину, як з нею гратися. Ті речі, про які Соломія говорила на попередній секції. У нас є окремий телеграм-канал щодо підтримки дитини для батьків і таке інше. Взагалі нова річ для нас, ми навіть не так задумувались над її необхідністю під час ковіду, як виникла потреба робити це зараз, це дистанційні садки. Звісно, в нас є дистанційні школи, вони переважно приватні в Україні, але наразі на період воєнного стану вони зробили безкоштовним доступ до свого контенту і до своїх викладачів. Щодо садків, у нас такого в Україні не було досвіду, і наразі ми його випробували за допомогою підтримки ЮНІСЕФ. У нас діє садочок, дистанційний садочок НУМО, де в різній ігровій формі розміщені різні розвивальні заняття для батьків, для дітей, які не вимагають багато матеріальних ресурсів і таке інше. До речі, знов-таки Соломія допомагає нам створювати контент для цього садочку, і таке інше. Я подумала про те, що якщо є потреба у Україні, які приймають наших діток в україномовному контенті, в тому числі електронному, ми могли би зробити англомовний перелік всього доступного, що можна використовувати, щоб фахівці тих країн мали, до прикладу, орієнтовний список, принаймні, тому що я розумію, що зараз ці канали дуже розрізнені. І якщо б це було підручно, ми б могли, звісно, в міністерстві це зробити, це абсолютно нескладно. І окремий виклик, я буду намагатись дуже коротко, бо я вже перебрала час, бачу, пані Наталя, вибачайте. Окремий виклик – це наші педагогічні працівники. Я би коротко хотіла зупинитися на рівні їхньому кваліфікації, тому що на першій сесії це питання підіймали, і зараз Тереза про це говорила, що дуже обмежені можливості щодо визнання кваліфікації, таке інше. Щоб орієнтуватися в системі дошкільної освіти, до війни працювало 141 563 вихователі. Це тільки вихователі, окрім іншого персоналу. І щодо рівня їхньої підготовки, то в системі дошкільної освіти в Україні можуть працювати лише вихователі, які мають вищу педагогічну освіту за спеціальністю дошкільна освіта. У нас є така окрема спеціальність в нашій вищій школі, або які мають професійну кваліфікацію педпрацівників. В Україні наразі впроваджена національна рамка кваліфікації, яка базується на принципах, європейських стандартах забезпечення якості освіти. І, звісно, що вона враховує критерії рамки кваліфікації європейського простору. Тобто тут можна орієнтуватися на оці речі, і якщо процес нострифікації, він дуже складний і дуже в часі займає багато часу, то я думаю, що уряди країн, які приймають, можуть піти на спрощення умов саме для українських педагогів, тому що насправді вони дуже фахові. Що стосується дипломів про освіту, які є відповідно до цієї рамки кваліфікації, які дозволяють нашим вихователям працювати в дитячих садочках, то ми дозволяємо це робити з дипломом молодшого бакалавра, це 5-й рівень національної рамки кваліфікації, дипломом бакалавра 6-й рівень і диплом магістра 7-й рівень. Окрім того, наші вихователі щороку раз на 5 років проходять проходять атестацію, і їм за результатами цієї атестації визнається або не визнається відповідність цього вихователя вихователя займаній посаді. Тобто в нас теж дуже структурована система відбору персоналу саме для цієї категорії дітей, тому що вони найбільш вразливі в контексті, що вони не можуть самі за себе постояти, тому дуже великі вимоги до педагогічних працівників в цьому ракурсі. Мабуть, я на цьому буду зупинятися, тому що я насправді багато чого хотіла сказати з приводу того, що ми дуже хочемо, щоб наші педагоги прагнемо, щоб лишались в українській системі освіти, тому що ми розуміємо, що в нас буде дуже великий запит на професіоналів після закінчення воєнних дій. Ми, як міністерство, рекомендуємо муніципалітетам, навіть якщо незалежно від того, чи в Україні педагог, чи він чи він за кордоном, чи триває освітній процес, чи не триває, максимально зберігати заробітну плату таким працівникам, щоб вони були мотивовані лишатися в цій системі, і для цього є спеціальні нормативні акти і закон про наше трудове законодавство, і таке інше, не буду в деталі вдаватись. Крім того, ми дуже просимо муніципалітети першочергово або пріоритетно забезпечувати педагогів житлом, якщо вони переміщуються на територію західних регіонів, щоб вони першочергово у разі потреби забезпечували їх харчуванням і використовували їхню працю, працевлаштовували у разі потреби, якщо така необхідність виникає. Для цього ми просимо, щоб вони обов'язково вели реєстр здобувачів освіти, які приїздять на їхню територію, щоб розуміти ту потребу в викладачах, яка може виникнути або яка існує наразі, щоб максимально залучати наших вихователів до роботи. Це якщо коротко, і я ще раз дуже дякую вам за цей захід і за те, що ви робите. Пані Наталія, перепрошую, я взагалі ваш час забрала.
Can't say how thankful we are, Oksana. I think that you just provided, jewels of information, and I think that's so much needed also for those that perhaps are not that familiar with the Ukrainian preschool system, with what's happening, the level of quality, the level of preparation. I think that many countries might envy you for the level of qualification that you have. So I think that this has been such a useful, but not only. I think it calibrates a lot our thinking about what is happening there, how much effort you're putting into protecting the workforce, but also to protecting the services and providing what's best for the children and their parents in conditions that you're having an overpopulated area. So I think that we might have challenges in the receiving countries, but you're also having tremendous challenges there. And I think that there's a lot of learning. It's very true what you're saying. There's a lot of learning that we can, it's not we and you, it's the receiving countries and Ukraine can learn from each other. Receiving country trying to provide solutions, you trying to provide solutions. So I think that we are all challenged, and all this collective thinking, it's tremendously helpful for all of us. We promise that we will create more opportunities for this to happen, and we hope that there will be another occasion where we can invite you and discuss perhaps of other topics that could be helpful in have a better understanding and in bridging, as I said, bridging the expertise that exists in Ukraine with the expertise that exists in other countries. And I will move us now towards Natalia, and she's the Deputy Director of the Institute for Education Development. Previously, she has been the Director of the Ukrainian Step-by-Step Foundation. So a long friendship that ties ISSA with Natalia. But besides that, and she's been quite instrumental in bringing all the colleagues from Ukraine to this event. Natalia, I know you know very upside down, inside out the Ukrainian early childhood education and care system. And I know that you've dedicated a lot of your time in trainings and building the capacity in the system and in bringing professionals together. And I think in the position you're having now, you are loyal to the same cause of how we can best support them and how we can offer the help that they so much need. Not that they are helpless, but they are, especially now, we talked in the first session about how much they also need as human beings, not only as professionals, to be supported. And I would just invite you to share now with us your thoughts about how we can create these places and spaces in time and physically or virtually so that professionals feel supported.
Yes, thank you, Michaela. And I will speak in English. And I just want to tell to Oksana that no need to say sorry, because I was happy to see in the chat that many people were asking about the next meetings. And I'm sure that you and other speakers and other participants will have more time, more opportunity to talk, to share the experience. And by saying it, I again want to say thank you, Michaela, Liana, and all international step-by-step team, and all participants and all speakers, for organizing this event, which is very, very valuable indeed. And maybe surprisingly, but I will start from the reminding that this year it's the 5th year of the educational reform, which has started in 2017, and its name was as the concept New Ukrainian School. The main components of these reforms, I will not take so much to describing it, just maybe some important aspects. So the main components are the new content of education, which is based on the competencies and values. It's the principle of partnership at all levels. It is the level of students, teachers, students, and also, which is very important, teachers, students, and parents. Inclusive education is one of the major components of our reform, autonomy of schools and teachers, and of course, the new ways of professional development. And our institute, Ukrainian Institute of Education Development, is a new structure because it was established by the Ministry of Education to support this reform, both at the level of content and at the level of professional development. And therefore, I am very happy to talk about this direction, especially professional development, because we all know that we might change the educational standards, we might change the educational programs, but it wouldn't play so critical a role as without changing the teachers' practice and teachers' approaches. So, and also I would like to say that although the educational reform started at the level of school, it was clear for all of us that expected changes are possible to achieve only if we start from the earlier age of children. Therefore, by conducting the reform at the level of school, of course, many changes have happened at the level of preschool. And as I said, both at the level of content, so the new educational standards for preschool education have been developed and approved, but also at the level of professional development. And here I will mention, maybe in addition to what Oksana has said already, so we have new professional standards for preschool teacher and for the kindergarten principals. And also, in addition to these kind of content things, another change was introduced in our legislation, and it was the new ways of professional development. And maybe in addition to the mainly traditional forms like in-service teacher training, different forms of postgraduate education, the new term, the new concept has been introduced in the Ukrainian legislation, and it was professional learning communities. So now there is a time when we translate this legal term into the practice. So it happened then that on February 24th, when actually the war has been started, we plan to conduct our meeting with international partners from 9 countries to share the best practices of professional learning communities. as well as our practice, our experience here in Ukraine. And we had to cancel it, but for a while. We will continue our initiative, although it will be, I believe, extended in terms of the content and the forms of professional communities development and operation. I also want to mention that that opportunity to share the experience of learning communities, professional learning communities, operations, and develop again was due to the big support of International Step-by-Step Association, but also support of European Vergeland Center. So we will continue despite these changes. So when I'm speaking about new forms of professional learning communities, so what I mean and what we can speak about now in this our changing circumstances. First of all, that these forms of professional learning communities will focus both in building capacities of teachers who stay in Ukraine, as well as the teachers who had to leave the country. And these new forms of partnership include, but not limited to, such as, and here I just, unfortunately, I will tell only our planned initiatives, and so far we do not have a lot of information, a lot of data or results of the analysis to analyze and to say what is working and what is what needs to be improved. But I hope that during our next meetings we'll have more information to share. So from what we already know and shared with our partners, including step-by-step partners in other countries, so this partnership at the level of practitioners now looks like that Ukrainian-speaking teachers play the role of teacher assistants in the classroom, as I know it happens in Latvia, also in Poland. So in this way, Ukrainian teachers who speak Ukrainian, they not only provide this language bridge, but also cultural bridge, and also in the situations when they can communicate with their colleagues, with the teachers, they also can share their professional expertise. We already discussed a lot with Romania and Moldova step-by-step organizations about providing the support through the summer activities, because we all know that our children who had to leave the country and who had to hide in the shelters, they lose a lot of the time either in kindergartens or in the schools where they get formal education and formal care. So these summer activities would be kind of compensation of their losses, but also the time when can be involved in different developmental activities. And the interesting thing that Ukrainian teachers who are staying in Ukraine, they would provide online consultations to the Ukrainian-speaking volunteers who are in these countries, who are in Romania and Moldova in particular. So this is another way of partnership, and for teachers who stay in Ukraine, but also for Ukrainian-speaking volunteers who can, in this way, be more confident and more competent by providing this support to children and their parents. I know that there was Sana who was talking in chat, and also Sana from Finland, in particular from Fun Academy NGO. Sana wrote in chat, and she introduced this booklet, wonderful booklet, Worry booklet, which is also developed and printed, is available in at least 15 languages. And the main, why I like this resource, because written in 2 languages, for example, Ukrainian and Polish, or Ukrainian and German, it was written for children 4-9 years old. it provides really inclusive strategy when children can be together in one classroom, and it doesn't matter how much Ukrainian children know the language of the classroom where in which country they are. They all together can do the same activity even in different languages. So this is for me a very wonderful example how the environment can be really inclusive. Another initiative which we are going to introduce, and this is initiative of the Ukrainian NGOs in Korea. And like Teresa said, that the NGOs are probably more flexible to respond to the existing needs. They want to introduce kind of educational Uber, like a taxi, right? Some kind of coordinating platform when teachers can find a relevant school in the country where the professional force is required. And also there are plans to introduce this initiative abroad when schools or preschools where there is a lack of, for example, Ukrainian-speaking professionals, they can order them, and vice versa, when Ukrainian professionals being in other countries can find the place for applying their competence and their skills. Talking about these new forms of professional learning communities, I would say new partnership. And talking about the content of this partnership, here I would say that before the war, we mostly focused on the professional issues. But like many of you mentioned already, that right now, more and more psychosocial issue is coming more critical. And here, as Ina said during the first session, so we faced that teachers by themselves can help each other. So it's like with inclusion, we not necessarily should wait until specialists come and help teachers. So we found out that we teachers are together by sharing the specific situations with the families, with children, sharing these stories, we can help each other. So, and this is another example how we plan with the help of Ukrainian-Finnish project Learning Together. Even its name sounds Learning Together. How to help through our in-service teacher training institution to provide training for teachers in terms they would provide support with psychosocial support for children in their classrooms. But what we would like to help them how to use the strategies which doesn't require maybe special support of specialists. Of course, it is very good always, but there are some things when teachers can do it by themselves, but so they shouldn't be afraid of. And again, when Solomia talked and so there might be some sensitive issues, you know, and some very often teachers are afraid to raise them because they do not know what to do when child would start to tell and then would cry. So there are some issues very simple which teachers can and should do. And thanks to Teresa, because here I can see we do correctly that we really conduct needs assessment, because psychosocial support is such a wide issue, but what exactly our teachers need to know. So we will see this week, we will see their more specific results of this needs assessment. And I started from the sad day, February 24th, when all this nightmare started, and we had to stop our peer learning activities. But fortunately, we are already kind of with the energy again to continue. And I'm sure this experience of the professional learning communities, which we will share with other countries, would be another quality, more extending. So, and at the end of the April, we will have the first webinar, international webinar. Again, I would repeat, with the help of International Step-by-Step Association and European Bergland Center. and we are looking forward to it because we all know that we can learn together a lot and everything. Actually, so this is my last one. The first logo, the first slogan of the step-by-step program was, "Who said we cannot change the world?" So the crucial word, we. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalia. Such an inspiration listening to you and Oksana and all the colleagues from Ukraine today. I think that for all of us, it has been a lot of food for thought of how you and all your colleagues as professionals are standing by the children, by families, by professionals in your country, and you find there the resource to fight every day with all your emotions, because I'm very much sure that you also need support, as all the other colleagues that have been together with us today. But by being today with us, for us, it mattered a lot. We are so thankful. We are really trying, to find ways of encountering your needs. But what you're doing there for us, it's absolutely fantastic. And we will do whatever is possible to support your work because it is amazing. Your example, and I have to say, it kind of gives goosebumps just to hear and listen of how much you're doing in such difficult conditions. And that's professionalism. And we are celebrating that with you. And rest assured, we are going to organize more events to feature, to broadcast everything that you are planning to do in such wonderful ways, and we know with a lot of professionalism. I will stop here because we are way out over our time, but I think it was not a single thought of shortening the discussion. Over to you, Liana.
Thank you, Mihaela. So yes, indeed, we went a bit over time. Thank you so much to all colleagues who stayed. It just shows indeed the thirst and hunger for such opportunities. And as you all heard, we plan to do more. And Natalia, you shared the slogan of step by step from the early years, who says we cannot change the world? So I hope we all stay with that. And my little story from the beginning, let's also stay with the certainty that none of us is alone. We are not alone. And together we can change the world. Together we can learn from each other. So stay connected, follow us on all these channels, or any or all of these channels, and you will for sure find out when the next ISSA Connects for Ukraine is. If you go back a previous slide, as Natalia already announced, we have in mind the next one to be around professional learning communities, but we picked up a lot of ideas from you today. So we have many other topics on which we can go in depth. So we'll stay in touch. We will, of course, connect with our members on the ground, read on the website stories about the inspiring work they do. And today it was a privilege to be with the colleagues from Ukraine. Your determination, your professionalism, your creativity is an inspiration to us all. So thank you for making the effort to be with us today. And we thank all the participants. Stay strong. We are not alone. And together we can change the world.